The night was a perfect, quiet masterpiece. A vast indigo dome, deep and velvety, stretched from horizon to horizon, its darkness punctuated by a breathtaking dusting of stars. Here, far from the persistent orange glow of cities, the Milky Way revealed itself not as a vague smudge, but as a luminous river of ancient light, a tangible bridge across the heavens. The air, cool and gentle, carried the clean, damp scent of pine and dew-soaked earth from the surrounding woods. It was the kind of stillness that wasn't empty, but full, a resonant quiet broken only by the rhythmic, hypnotic chirping of crickets and the occasional, distant call of an owl. This was a place for deep breaths and deeper thoughts, a sanctuary where the modern world felt like a faint, forgotten dream. Sarah, standing on the weathered wooden planks of her back porch, felt the day's tensions meld away into that cool, starry embrace. She sipped her tea, its warmth a pleasant contrast to the air on her skin, and simply looked up. There was no goal, no urgency. This was her nightly ritual, a few stolen moments of peace beneath the cosmos. Her eyes traced the familiar constellations, Orion's bold belt, the gentle curve of the Big Dipper, anchors in the celestial sea. The peace was tangible, a soft blanket around her shoulders. It was in this state of perfect, open calm that the first anomaly quietly announced itself. At first, it was just a subtle shift in perception. A single star, one she hadn't particularly noted before in the southern sky, seemed to pulse. Not dramatically, but with a soft, rhythmic throb of light, like a distant heartbeat made of brilliance. She blinked, assuming a trick of her tired eyes or the gentle dance of the atmosphere. But the pulsing continued, steady and deliberate. Then it began to move, not with the swift, straight-line certainty of a satellite, nor the graceful arc of a meteor. This was different. It drifted slowly, almost thoughtfully, changing direction with impossible, fluid gentleness, as if navigating currents unseen to human eyes. A soft, electric tingle, not of fear but of profound curiosity, traveled up her spine. This was new. The initial light was soon joined by others. Not one, but 3 more points of light emerged from the darkness, arranging themselves around the first in a silent, geometric dance. They moved in perfect, silent unison, forming a diamond pattern that rotated slowly against the backdrop of the static stars. There was no sound, no roar of engines, no crackle of energy. Their silence was more profound than the night's own quiet, a void of noise that seemed to pull at the very air around her. Sarah stood transfixed, her teacup forgotten, its warmth gone. The ordinary night had been gently peeled back, revealing a layer of reality she had only ever wondered about in fleeting daydreams. What were they? The question formed in her mind, not with panic, but with a widening sense of awe. As the silent formation hovered, one of the lights, the original pulsing one, detached itself. It descended from the diamond pattern, not plummeting, but gliding down with a serene, controlled grace. It moved lower, closer, until it was no longer a point of light among stars, but a distinct, softly luminous object hanging just above the tree-line at the far end of her meadow. The light from it was cool, a pearlescent white blue that cast long, stark shadows across the tall grass without illuminating the object's own shape. It was a light that revealed, yet concealed. The crickets had fallen silent. The world was holding its breath. From this silent, glowing vessel, a figure emerged. The transition was seamless. One moment there was only light and shadow at the meadow's edge. The next, a tall, slender form stood amidst the swaying grass. It walked toward the house, not with the mechanical gait of a machine or the hurried pace of an intruder, but with an eerie, fluid patience. Each step was deliberate, smooth, as if it were moving through water rather than air. As it drew closer, emerging from the deeper shadows into the faint ambient starlight, its features solidified in Sarah's frozen gaze. It was tall and impossibly thin, with limbs that seemed too long for its narrow torso. Its skin was not green, not silver, but a shade of gray that seemed to absorb the scant light, the gray of old ashes, of moonlit concrete, a color that spoke of desolation and distance. The head was large, domed, and profoundly bald, tapering down to a delicate, almost fragile-looking chin. But it was the eyes that captured her, that held her in a grip far stronger than fear. They were large, almond-shaped, and utterly black, obsidian orbs that reflected no spark of light, no star, no hint of her own terrified face. They were windows into a deep, starless void. They held no malice, no warmth, no readable emotion at all, just an immense, bottomless observation. The figure stopped at the edge of the porch light's reach, a respectful distance away. It simply stood, looking at her with those fathomless eyes. There were no words, no telepathic messages, no dramatic gestures. Just a presence, an acknowledgement. In that endless moment, Sarah felt a bizarre cocktail of emotions. Ice-cold terror at the sheer otherness before her, but beneath it, a strange, thrumming sense of significance. This was not random. This was a meeting. The night's perfect peace had not been shattered. It had been transformed into a different kind of quiet, the quiet of a threshold being crossed. Then, as smoothly as it had arrived, the figure took a slow step backward, then another, merging once more with the shadows of the meadow. The soft, blue-white light above the trees brightened momentarily, and the form was gone. The luminous object ascended silently, rejoining its diamond-shaped companions high above. As one, the lights pulsed a final time, then shot upward with impossible speed, vanishing into the starfield from whence they came, leaving no trail. The crickets, tentatively, began their song again. The ordinary night rushed back in, but it was no longer ordinary. It was a mask, and she had seen what lay beneath. Sarah remained on the porch for a long time, the cold cup in her hands, staring at the empty spot in the meadow. She knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that her understanding of the world had just been irrevocably altered. But this encounter, profound and personal as it was just the beginning of a pattern that would span decades and touch millions of lives, a single thread in a vast and bewildering tapestry of contact. From that singular, life-altering moment on a quiet porch, we can widen our gaze. Sarah's visitor was not an anomaly, but part of a chorus of descriptions so consistent, it has etched a specific silhouette into the collective human mind. This is the silhouette of the gray. So, who or what are they? Let us gently unpack this mystery, not with the harsh light of clinical analysis, but with the soft focus of curious observation, building a foundation for the deeper questions to come. The physical portrait of the gray is remarkably uniform across decades and continents. Imagine a form of stark, minimalist biology. They are typically described as standing between 3.5 to 4.5 feet tall, possessing a frame of unsettling thinness. Their limbs are long and slender, almost delicate, attached to a narrow torso that seems to lack the muscular definition of a human. Their skin is the source of their name, a smooth, hairless, and uniform gray, often compared to clay, graphite, or wet ash. It gives the impression of being cool to the touch. The head is disproportionately large, dome-shaped, and often described as tapering to a pointed chin. But it is the face, or rather, the focal point of it, that dominates every account and every imagined depiction, the eyes. Enormous, almond-shaped, and pitch black, they wrap around the sides of the head, lacking visible pupils, irises, or whites. They are windows that seem to absorb all light and give nothing back, instruments of pure, penetrating observation. This iconic image did not simply spring from nowhere. While strange beings have populated human myth for millennia, The specific gray archetype solidified in the mid-20th century, following the cultural shockwaves of the 1947 Roswell incident and its ensuing whispers. However, careful sifting of older reports reveals intriguing precursors. Some point to the 1961 abduction case of Betty and Barney Hill, under hypnosis, describing beings with large eyes and grayish skin as a pivotal moment that crystallized the image in the public psyche. Others trace threads further back, to weird encounters from the 19th century or even earlier folklore of diminutive, otherworldly beings. What changed in the 20th century was the medium. The rise of global media, television, and film allowed this specific set of characteristics to circulate, be reinforced, and become a shared cultural shorthand for alien. Beyond their appearance, a set of common behavioral characteristics emerges from the haze of testimony. Their movement is frequently described as fluid, silent, and economical, sometimes seeming almost gliding or mechanical. Communication is rarely reported as verbal. Instead, experiencers speak of telepathic impressions, a direct transfer of concepts, images, or commands into the mind, often accompanied by an intense, unwavering gaze from those large black eyes. Their technology, glimpsed inside craft, is described as seamless, organic-looking, and devoid of visible controls, interfaces that respond to thought or touch alone. Perhaps most consistently, witnesses describe an emotional atmosphere surrounding them, a sense of cool detachment, a clinical, almost analytical focus. This is not the raging hostility of a Hollywood invader, nor the warm benevolence of a space-age angel. It is a profound, inscrutable neutrality. This neutrality is key to understanding their name. The Greys is a simple, descriptive label born from witness testimony. It lacks the narrative baggage of terms like demons or angels, and avoids the speculative weight of extraterrestrial biological entities. It is a plain, almost gentle term for something utterly extraordinary, capturing their most immediate visual trait. It's a name that allows for mystery, that doesn't presuppose their origin or intent. It simply observes, they are gray, and observe them we have, everywhere in our culture. They have become the default alien, the logo for the unknown. They stare out from book covers and magazine racks, their silhouettes haunting movie posters and television shows. They are the subject of campfire stories and serious documentaries. This omnipresence creates a fascinating loop. Does culture shape our encounters, or do encounters shape our culture? The gray has become a modern myth, a symbol lodged in our collective subconscious representing the ultimate other, technology, cold intellect, and the hidden truths of the cosmos. They are our mirror, reflecting back our fears of insignificance and our hopes for cosmic connection. It is helpful, in this calm exploration, to distinguish them from other reported visitors. They are not the tall, blonde, Nordic-looking beings often associated with spiritual messages. They lack the reptilian scales and aggression described in more fringe narratives. They are distinct from the short, furry little green men of earlier 20th century pop culture. The Greys occupy their own unique niche, the technologists, the examiners, the quiet collectors of data. Their aesthetic is not biological in a way we recognize, but almost biomechanical, a perfect fusion of being and purpose that feels designed rather than evolved. So, we have a portrait, a consistent physical form, a pattern of behavior, a powerful cultural presence. We can describe what they look like, how they move, how they have seeped into our stories. We have built the frame. Yet, despite thousands of reports painting this eerily coherent picture, one question remains unanswered, hanging in the air as heavy and significant as their silent ships. Why are they here? The frame is complete, but the painting within it is still emerging from the shadows, stroke by mysterious stroke. When a single story is told in the dark, it can be dismissed as a dream, a trick of the mind. But when the same story is whispered from countless corners of the world, by voices that have never met, a different truth begins to shimmer into view. The experience of Sarah on her porch is not a lonely footnote. It is one verse in a vast, sprawling epic, an epic written not in words, but in shared memories etched under starlight. As we trace our fingers across the map of these encounters, a pattern emerges from the chaos, soft and undeniable as a constellation connecting distant points of light. The timeline itself tells a story of increasing presence. While earlier centuries speak of fairy folk and mysterious little people, the modern pattern of the gray truly begins to stitch itself together in the mid-20th century. The 1947 Roswell incident, with its whispers of recovered bodies, planted a seed. The 1961 abduction of Betty and Barney Hill provided a detailed, psychological blueprint. The 1970s brought waves of close encounters, from the Travis Walton case to the broad phenomenon of the Pascagoula abduction. Each decade that followed added new threads. The viral mystery of the 1997 Phoenix Lights, the deeply unsettling testimony from the 2004 Nimitz encounters regarding Tic Tac craft, and the continuous stream of personal accounts shared in the digital age. This isn't a random scattering of events, but a crescendo, a rhythm of contact that has slowly, steadily, moved from the fringes of society toward the center of our collective awareness. More compelling than the timeline are the common elements that recur with eerie consistency, as if each witness had been given the same strange script. The setting is often one of liminal space, the quiet hours between midnight and dawn, on lonely rural roads, or in the vulnerable intimacy of the bedroom. The sequence of events follows a recognizable flow, a period of missing time the witness cannot account for, a vivid recall of a brightly lit, sterile environment, and the presence of the Greys performing meticulous, sometimes physical examinations. Witnesses consistently describe a paralysis, a surrendering of bodily control, paired with a hyperclarity of mind. The emotional aftermath, too, forms a pattern. Initial terror giving way to a profound, lifelong confusion, and often, a nagging sense of having been chosen for a purpose that remains frustratingly opaque. Geographically, the phenomenon refuses to be pinned down, yet it displays curious clusters. The vast, open skies of the American Southwest seem to be a particular hotspot, a modern-day crossroads for the unexplained. But equally potent clusters appear in the dense rainforests of Brazil, the ancient landscapes of the United Kingdom, and across the outback of Australia. It is as if certain locations, often rich in geological anomaly or ancient human history, act as subtle magnets, or perhaps doorways. This global distribution argues against a simple hoax or a localized cultural fantasy. The pattern is woven across the entire tapestry of human civilization. The most striking pattern, of course, is the physical description itself. From a farmer in Zimbabwe to a pilot in Chile, from a child in Sweden to an elderly woman in Japan, the details align with a precision that defies coincidence. The large, black, wraparound eyes. The gray, seamless skin. The small, thin frame. The hairless, domed head. This is not a case of people seeing what they expect to see from movies. In many early reports, witnesses struggled to find any frame of reference, describing the beings in raw, confused terms that only later coalesced into the now familiar archetype. The consistency is the bedrock of the mystery, suggesting we are not dealing with 1,000 different imaginations, but with 1,000 glimpses of the same objective, if incomprehensible, reality. Why do these patterns matter? They are the signal in the noise. They move the phenomenon from the realm of the purely subjective and anomalous into the realm of something potentially studiable. Patterns imply rules. Rules imply intention. If these were merely hallucinations or psychic phenomena, we would expect wild, chaotic diversity. Instead, we find a haunting uniformity, a set of rules governing the interaction. This consistency is what transforms the phenomenon from a collection of scary bedtime stories into a genuine ontological puzzle, a mystery with a shape, a contour, a discernible methodology. It is within this framework of intentional, patterned contact that our central question gently unfolds. If this is not random, then what is its purpose? The clinical detachment, the physical examinations, the taking of genetic material reported in some cases. These suggest a project, a cold, scientific agenda that could be interpreted as one of control, of cataloging and manipulating a planetary species. Yet, the lack of overt hostility, the profound psychic connections some report, the simple act of repeated, observable presence, these whisper of something else. A desire for connection, for observation leading to understanding, or perhaps for a slow, careful integration. The pattern itself does not provide the answer, but it beautifully, frustratingly, frames the duality. These patterns suggest something far more profound than random visits. They hint at an agenda that's been unfolding for generations, an agenda balanced on the razor's edge between control and connection, waiting for us to understand its true nature. As we move from the open sky of sightings to the more intimate, unsettling terrain of direct contact, the pattern of the grays takes on a new dimension. The phenomenon of abduction is where the theory of control finds its most compelling and most disquieting evidence. It is a chapter written not in lights in the sky, but in the quiet hours of missing time, in the vivid, fragmented memories that return like echoes from a hidden room. To explore this is not to succumb to fear, but to calmly acknowledge the stranger contours of the mystery, understanding that within these accounts lies a potential key to the Gray's intentions. The abduction narrative entered public consciousness with undeniable force through a few landmark cases. The story of Betty and Barney Hill in 1961 provided the first detailed blueprint, described under hypnosis. The stopped car, the beings with large eyes, the examination on a ship. In 1975, the case of Travis Walton captivated the world, a logger allegedly taken for 5 days, returning with a traumatic, detailed story of a sterile environment and gray beings. That same decade, the Pascagoula incident involved 2 fishermen who reported being floated aboard a craft and examined by robotic entities. These are not vague sightings. They are structured narratives of taken individuals, of a process initiated and controlled entirely by the other. They established a template that thousands would later recognize in their own fragmented experiences. Within these and countless other testimonies, a set of common, chillingly clinical elements emerges with remarkable consistency. The experience often begins with a period of missing time, a gap in memory that can range from minutes to hours, sometimes discovered only by noticing unexplained physical traces or through the slow return of dreams and flashbacks. The core memory, when it surfaces, is frequently of a medical examination. Witnesses describe being placed on a smooth, hard table under bright, shadowless light. The gray beings perform procedures that feel both technologically advanced and strangely archaic, scraping skin, taking blood, inserting long needles, focusing intently on reproductive systems. Many report the sensation of small, foreign objects, implants, being placed in their bodies, often in the sinus cavity, behind the ear, or in a limb, said to be for tracking or monitoring. The psychological impact on those who undergo this is profound and lifelong. While initial reactions understandably involve terror and trauma, the lasting effect is often a deep, existential disorientation. Abductees, or experiencers, as many prefer, speak of feeling like a book that has been read, a specimen that has been cataloged. There is a pervasive sense of violation, not necessarily in a violent, malicious sense, but in a clinical one, a violation of autonomy, of the basic human right to one's own body and consciousness. This erodes the foundation of personal reality, leaving individuals caught between two worlds, struggling to integrate an experience that defies all conventional understanding. Central to these accounts is the overwhelming feeling of powerlessness. The paralysis that often initiates the event is more than physical. It represents a total suspension of will. Witnesses speak of being unable to move, scream, or resist, their mind vividly aware while their body is rendered an inert object. This complete dominance is a hallmark of the control hypothesis. The Greys are not negotiating or asking permission. They are executing a procedure. The environment is always on their terms, within their craft, following their script. The human in the equation is not a participant, but a subject. The search for physical evidence lends a tantalizing, concrete weight to these subjective reports. Unexplained scars, scoop marks, precise linear cuts, or puncture wounds often appear on abductees' bodies after an episode. Photographs and X-rays have purportedly shown strange, microscopic objects of unknown composition lodged in tissue, objects that, when removed, are sometimes said to exhibit unusual electromagnetic properties. While fiercely debated, this suggested evidence points toward a physical, biological interaction. It implies the phenomenon leaves a material trace, moving it beyond pure psychology into the realm of tangible, if enigmatic, intervention. Perhaps most telling for the control theory is the repetitive nature of many abductions. For numerous experiencers, this is not a one-time event, but a lifelong program. They report being taken repeatedly, from childhood into adulthood, sometimes with the sense that they are part of an ongoing study. The Greys, in these narratives, act like perennial caretakers of a long-term experiment, checking in on their subjects, collecting data across a human lifespan. This repetition speaks of agenda, of project management, of a cold, sustained interest that spans generations. It is the opposite of a random, curious encounter. It is systematic. So, we are presented with a portrait of methodical, physical interaction defined by clinical procedure, a suspension of autonomy, and a lasting sense of being a specimen in a grand, invisible study. The patterns are too consistent, the emotional echoes too similar, to dismiss lightly. They paint a picture where control is not just a possibility, but the defining characteristic of the interaction. But if control is their agenda, what exactly are they controlling, and why? Is it our bodies, our genetics, our very evolution they seek to direct? The next layer of the mystery awaits, hidden within the purpose of the examination itself. The sterile examination room memory is unsettling enough, but within the deeper currents of abduction testimony lies an even more profound and controversial narrative strand. It suggests that clinical procedures have a specific, ultimate goal, one that moves beyond mere study into the realm of creation. This is the hybridization program theory, a concept that transforms the Greys from observers or examiners into architects of a new genetic future. To consider it is to venture into the most speculative layer of the phenomenon, where the lines between nightmare, prophecy, and a strange kind of hope become intriguingly blurred. The theory found its voice most prominently through the work of researchers like Bud Hopkins and Dr. David Jacobs. Through decades of hypnotic regression with experiencers, they identified a recurring and disturbing pattern. After initial examinations, many abductees, particularly women, reported procedures involving the extraction of ova, while some men reported providing sperm samples. Later, in subsequent abductions, these same individuals would be presented with hybrid offspring. The descriptions are hauntingly consistent. Babies or children that appear almost human, yet possess subtly alien traits: larger, darker eyes, unusually pale and fine skin, sparse hair, and an aura of profound sadness or fragility. These hybrid children are often described as being cared for in nursery-like environments aboard the crafts, and experiencers are sometimes encouraged to hold or bond with them, only to have the child taken away again. Witness testimonies about these encounters are emotionally charged and deeply polarizing. One woman might describe being shown a toddler who reaches for her, filling her with a confusing surge of maternal instinct for a being that is not fully hers. Another might recall rows of silent, listless infants in translucent incubators, a vision evoking more pity than terror. For male experiencers, the encounters can be framed as a proud display, a showing of their genetic contribution. These are not stories of violent conquest, but of a chilling, intimate form of collaboration enforced from a position of total control. The emotional response from the human involved is typically one of devastating cognitive dissonance, a bond forced into existence under duress, creating love, guilt, and horror in equal measure. From a purely biological standpoint, the idea of hybridization between human and a species from another star system seems an impossibility of staggering magnitude. Our DNA, the product of billions of years of terrestrial evolution, would be as compatible with an extraterrestrial genome as a symphony is with a stone. This is the strongest scientific argument against the theory. However, proponents within the field offer speculative explanations. Perhaps the Greys are not as alien as they seem. Maybe they are a future human derivative or a parallel branch of terrestrial evolution, making genetic compatibility less far-fetched. Alternatively, their technology may be so advanced it can rewrite biological code at a fundamental level, splicing and editing genomes to force compatibility where none should exist. The theory, therefore, demands we either reconsider the origin of the Greys or accept a technological prowess that borders on magic. But to what end? Why would such a program exist? Two primary purpose theories emerge, both fitting the chillingly logical framework of the control hypothesis. The first is species survival. Some speculate the Greys are a dying race, a species that has genetically bottlenecked through cloning or radiation, losing vitality and the ability to reproduce naturally. In this bleak view, humanity is a fertile genetic reservoir, a donor species to be harvested to infuse new life into a fading lineage. The second theory is one of purposeful genetic experimentation. Here, we are not a savior species, but a petri dish. The goal is to create a new hybrid form, perhaps one better suited to survive on a changing Earth, or to act as intermediaries, beings who can bridge the biological and consciousness gap between two species, designed for a role in a long-term plan we cannot yet perceive. The long-term implications, if any part of this theory holds a grain of truth, are universe-altering. It would mean human evolution is no longer a natural, terrestrial process. It has become a directed, managed program. The human genome is not entirely our own. It suggests a future where our world may one day be shared with, or even inherited by, a new species that is partly us and partly them. This isn't merely contact. It is integration at the most fundamental biological level. It posits a reality where the concept of humanity itself may be expanding or being subtly replaced, according to a blueprint we did not write. This theory represents the ultimate expression of the control hypothesis. It is not just about monitoring or testing. It is about ownership of our biological destiny, about using human life as raw material for a project that serves alien ends. The examinations, the implants, the tracking, all could be in service of this grand, generational breeding program. It frames humanity not as partners in a cosmic community, but as a farm, a genetic library being meticulously curated and utilized. Yet, within this cold calculus, the reported moments of bonding with hybrid children introduce a baffling, emotional wildcard. Perhaps the answer to their ultimate goal lies not in what they're taking from us, but in what they're creating and the strange, sorrowful connection they seem to foster between creator and donor. This leads us to the precipice of the other great possibility. What if this is not control, but a desperate, clumsy form of connection beyond the physical procedures and genetic implications? The most pervasive and intimate arena of the control hypothesis exists within the very fabric of the human mind. If the body can be rendered paralyzed on a table, what of consciousness itself? Accounts of interactions with the Greys consistently point to a profound manipulation of mental space, a quiet, efficient technology of thought that makes their physical instruments seem almost crude. This is the territory of telepathy, memory wipes, and implanted visions, where the line between communication and absolute control becomes whisper-thin. The most commonly reported facet of this is telepathic communication. Witnesses do not describe hearing words in their ears, but rather experiencing a sudden, clear knowing. Concepts, images, instructions, or even complex emotional states are placed directly into the conscious mind, bypassing the need for language. This communication is often described as neutral in tone, but staggeringly authoritative. There is no dialogue, no back and forth. It is a one-way transmission of information or command. This in itself represents a foundational level of control, the ability to insert thoughts into another being's private consciousness. The human mind, the last sanctuary of the self, is suddenly no longer private. It becomes a room others can enter and rearrange without permission. The phenomenon of missing time is perhaps the most disorienting evidence of this mental tampering. Hours vanish from memory, leaving only a blank space and a lingering sense of unease. This suggests not just an induced paralysis, but a sophisticated editing of lived experience, a removal of events from the personal narrative. The mind is left with a gap, an instinct that something significant occurred, but no data to process it. This is control at the level of autobiography. It prevents the witness from integrating the event, from forming a coherent story of their own life, leaving them psychologically adrift. It is the ultimate gaslighting, performed not by a person, but by a non-human intelligence. Even more intricate are reports of screen memories, false but vivid experiences implanted to cover the real event. A witness might remember seeing a majestic owl staring intently at their window, or a deer standing peculiarly still in the woods, when hypnosis or subsequent recall reveals a gray entity in its place. These memories feel real, authentic, and perfectly tailored to the individual's psyche to provide a palatable, if strange, explanation for the missing time and lingering fear. This moves beyond erasure into active fabrication. It demonstrates an intimate understanding of human psychology and perception, an ability to craft a believable reality and seamlessly graft it onto a person's memory, redirecting their suspicion and confusion into safer channels. In the wake of encounters, many experiencers report subtle but significant behavioral changes. Some develop sudden phobias, often of specific sounds or medical procedures. Others feel a heightened sense of environmental awareness or a nagging urge to pursue certain interests, like astronomy or genetics, as if a seed of curiosity had been planted. Some describe a newfound detachment from ordinary human affairs, as if they are now observers of their own species. While these could be natural psychological responses to trauma, within the control framework, they are viewed as potential programming, subtle behavioral nudges installed during the encounter to serve an unknown purpose, guiding a person's life path from the shadows. The presumed technology behind these effects lies so far beyond our understanding it borders on the psychic or magical. We have no scientific model for a device that can precisely erase, retrieve, or fabricate specific memories, or transmit complex information directly into the brain. This suggests a neuroscience and a physics we have not yet glimpsed, a mastery of consciousness as a tangible field or substrate that can be manipulated. In their hands, The mind appears to be not a sacred, ephemeral mystery, but a readable, writable medium. This technological chasm alone reinforces the power imbalance central to the control hypothesis. This brings us to the delicate, almost philosophical boundary between control and communication. From the human perspective, having one's thoughts inserted, memories deleted, and false ones implanted is the epitome of violation and control. It is the negation of free will and authentic experience. But we must pause and consider a different vantage point. What if, for the Greys, this is simply their mode of interaction? If their consciousness is naturally collective or telepathic, direct mental interface might be their fundamental way of relating, as natural to them as speech is to us. The editing of traumatic memories could be seen not as sinister cover-up, but as a clumsy attempt at mercy, a way to shield a less robust psyche from experiences it cannot yet integrate. The perceived commands might be necessary instructions for a biological procedure they see as essential. Yet what seems like control to us might appear entirely different from their perspective, a necessary methodology, or even a form of care, conducted within a framework of such profound difference that our concepts of consent and autonomy have no translation. This unsettling thought gently nudges us away from the stark paradigm of control and toward the more ambiguous, and perhaps more mysterious, possibility of attempted connection. After navigating the shadowed corridors of the control hypothesis, a different path emerges, bathed in a softer, more enigmatic light. Not all brushes with the gray presence are tales of clinical terror or psychological violation. Woven through the tapestry of contact are threads of a different color, stories that speak not of domination, but of concern, not of cold experimentation, but of a profound, if inscrutable, connection. This is the connection hypothesis, and it begins with the simplest, most compelling question: what if they are trying to tell us something? Across decades of reports, a subset of encounters stands apart, characterized by an atmosphere of serene communication. In these accounts, the stark examination room is replaced by a sense of deliberate, almost diplomatic, exchange. Witnesses describe being shown panoramic, immersive visions, vivid depictions of Earth from space, thriving ecosystems, and then, contrastingly, landscapes scarred by pollution, deforestation, and the silent, invisible poison of radiation. The message is rarely delivered in complex language, but as a direct, emotional impression, a deep sorrow at the damage, and an urgent, compelling sense of stewardship. The feeling imparted is not one of accusation, but of a shared responsibility for a fragile, living world. Most famously and consistently, these benevolent messages have centered on the existential threat of nuclear weapons. From contactees in the 1950s to experiencers in the modern day, a specific warning echoes. The unleashing of atomic forces creates a ripple not just in our physical reality, but in the fabric of space-time itself, a disturbance that is detectable and apparently deeply concerning across vast interstellar distances. The vision of a globe enveloped in thermonuclear fire is a recurring motif, accompanied by a plea, or a firm instruction, to dismantle these instruments of species suicide. This is not the strategy of an invader. An invader might welcome such self-destruction. This is the intervention of a neighbor who hears a family arguing with lit matches in a room full of gasoline. The emotional signature of these encounters is what truly distinguishes them. Where abduction narratives speak of terror and paralysis, these contact experiences are frequently described with words like awe, love, and universal connection. Witnesses report being flooded with a sense of deep, unconditional peace, a feeling of being recognized as part of a vast, interconnected cosmic family. The large, black eyes of the Greys, so often read as empty and menacing, are in these moments perceived as wise, ancient, and filled with a compassionate intensity. The telepathic communication carries a vibrational quality of warmth, a sense of being uplifted and understood at a soul level, leaving the experiencer not traumatized, but spiritually transformed. This leads to a fascinating pattern within the phenomenon, the transformation of fear. Many who initially experience a classic, terrifying abduction later report, in subsequent contacts or through personal reflection, a shift in understanding. The clinical procedures are recontextualized not as violation, but as a necessary, if unsettling, medical interaction, a preparatory step for a deeper communion. The fear is reframed as a human reaction to the utterly unknown, a primal response that slowly melts under the persistent, patient presence of the beings. What began as a nightmare evolves, for some, into a sacred responsibility, a calling to share a message of planetary unity and cosmic citizenship. Within this framework, the Greys are reinterpreted. They are not cold scientists or genetic farmers, but rather concerned observers. They are the elders of the galactic neighborhood, watching a young, volatile species play with forces it barely comprehends. Their repeated appearances, their interventions in nuclear facilities, which some report as deactivating warheads, and their environmental warnings paint a portrait of a civilization attempting a delicate, non-invasive form of guidance. They are not here to rule, but to shepherd, not to conquer, but to caution. Their methodology may be baffling and sometimes frightening to us, but its ultimate goal, in this view, is benevolent, to ensure we do not destroy our world or ourselves before we mature into a stable, interstellar species. This perspective naturally confronts us with a logical counterpoint to the fears of control. It poses a gentle, yet powerful, question that has echoed through the decades of contact lore. If they meant us harm, why would they deliver warnings instead of weapons? If their agenda was purely exploitative or dominatory, the logical course would be to let a nuclear war run its course and then claim a scarred planet, or to simply remain hidden while we exhaust our resources. Their apparent efforts to communicate, to warn, and to foster a sense of universal connection suggest an investment in our survival and evolution. This investment hints at a relationship far more complex than master and subject. It suggests we might be students in a classroom we have only just begun to notice, and the curriculum is nothing less beyond
than
the
our
transmission
own future.
of specific warnings about Earth lies an even more subtle and personal dimension of the connection hypothesis. This dimension concerns not the planet, but the individual mind, not survival, but evolution. Many who have had prolonged or profound encounters with the gray presence report a curious and lasting aftereffect, a fundamental shift in their own consciousness. It is as if the encounter acts as a catalyst, unlocking dormant faculties and broadening the very aperture through which they perceive reality. This suggests a purpose far more intricate than simple messaging. Perhaps they are gardeners of awareness, here not to control our bodies, but to awaken our minds. In the weeks, months, and years following an encounter, experiencers often describe a gradual but undeniable expansion of their own awareness. The world seems sharper, more vivid, and more interconnected. Colors may appear more saturated, sounds more layered, and the natural world pulsates with a sense of aliveness it lacked before. This is not merely a heightened aesthetic sense, it is a perceptual shift. Many report a deepened intuition, a knowing about people or situations that proves uncannily accurate. The boundary between the self and the environment feels more permeable, as if they are tuning into a frequency of existence that was always present, but previously silent. This awakening frequently extends into the development of psychic or extrasensory abilities that were absent prior to contact. Some find they have sudden, spontaneous episodes of clairvoyance or precognition, glimpsing future events in dreams or waking visions. Others report telepathic flashes, an ability to sense the unspoken thoughts or emotions of those around them. Telekinesis, the mental influence of physical objects, is also occasionally reported, though more rarely. While skeptics attribute this to the power of suggestion or latent psychological traits, the experiencers themselves overwhelmingly link the onset of these abilities directly to the encounter. It feels less like a random mutation and more like the activation of a latent human potential, a user manual being quietly delivered to a system they never knew they possessed. For many, this journey culminates in what can only be described as a full spiritual awakening, a materialistic view of the universe, where consciousness is a byproduct of the brain, dissolves. In its place arises a conviction that consciousness is primary, the fundamental substance of reality, and the physical world is its manifestation. The Greys, in this context, are perceived not as biological aliens from another star, but as highly advanced consciousnesses interacting with them from a different density or vibrational plane. The encounter becomes a spiritual initiation, a shocking but necessary event to break the trance of ordinary reality and reveal the deeper, luminous nature of existence. Central to many of these accounts is the experience of the download, a sudden, overwhelming influx of complex information that floods the mind during the encounter. This isn't a simple message about peace. It can be a torrent of symbolic mathematics, cosmological principles, biological blueprints, or philosophical understandings about the nature of time and soul. The experiencer may not intellectually comprehend the data, but they feel its truth resonating within them. This knowledge often lies dormant, emerging later in life as sudden insights, creative inspirations, or an effortless understanding of concepts they've never studied. It is as if a vast file was transferred to their subconscious to be unpacked over a lifetime. Naturally, such a fundamental rewiring of perception leads to dramatic changes in life perspective and priorities. Careers tied to status or material accumulation often lose their meaning. Relationships are reevaluated for their depth and authenticity. There is a powerful, sometimes urgent, pull towards service, to healing, to teaching, to environmental activism, or to simply living in greater harmony. The petty dramas of daily life recede against the backdrop of a vast, mysterious, and intelligent cosmos. The experiencer feels less like a solitary human and more like a conscious node in a universal network, with a role to play in a story much larger than themselves. This points toward the ultimate goal of this form of contact, fostering a connection to universal consciousness. The Greys, in this benevolent interpretation, are not here to make us more like them, but to help us become more fully who we are, conscious, sovereign beings aware of our place in a living universe. Their methods, however jarring, are designed to shatter our limited paradigms and initiate us into a broader communion. They are the tutors who administer a startling, immersive curriculum to jolt the student out of a deep sleep. The examination table, the telepathic commands, the vivid visions, all could be tools not for control, but for catalyzing a specific, transformative psycho-spiritual crisis. Perhaps they're not here to control our bodies, but to awaken our minds, guiding us gently, if mysteriously, toward our next step in conscious evolution. If the Greys are indeed acting from a place of connection and not control, their persistent, multi-generational presence invites a final, forward-looking question. To what end? What is the purpose of the warnings, the consciousness expansions, the careful, recurring interactions with individuals across the globe? One compelling thread within the connection hypothesis suggests we are not merely being observed or mentored, we are being prepared. Slowly, patiently, and with immense care, they might be guiding humanity toward a threshold, getting us ready for a reality so vast that to encounter it unprepared could shatter our collective psyche. This preparation is often framed around theories of upcoming global changes. These are not necessarily prophecies of doom, but visions of transition. Some contactees report being shown futures where Earth undergoes significant, perhaps inevitable, geophysical shifts, changes in climate, magnetic poles, or even consciousness itself. In this context, the environmental messages are not just ethical pleas, but practical survival guides. The Greys, possessing a cosmic perspective of time, might see these changes on the horizon and are intervening to bolster our resilience, to steer us toward greater harmony with our planet, to ensure we weather the coming shifts as a unified species, not a fractured one. Their methodology for this preparation is notably gradual. It follows a pattern of incremental disclosure. They do not land on the White House lawn because, this theory posits, such an overt, sudden revelation would cause global societal collapse. Religious, economic, and political structures could fracture under the weight of the new reality. Instead, they seed the idea through decades of pop culture, through millions of personal sightings and encounters that drip into the collective unconscious. They allow the truth to emerge slowly, letting humanity acclimatize to the idea of non-human intelligence at its own pace. Each generation grows up with the concept a little more normalized than the last, building a foundation of acceptance. A key part of this strategy appears to be the preparation of select individuals as ambassadors or interpreters. The people who undergo profound contact experiences, with their expanded awareness, their downloaded information, and their transformed priorities, are not random victims. They are potential catalysts. Scattered throughout society, they often become teachers, writers, artists, or activists, their altered perspectives subtly influencing their communities. They carry within them a lived truth about the cosmic neighborhood, acting as living bridges between the old human paradigm and the emerging one. Their very existence makes the eventual broader revelation less shocking, because there will already be those among us who can say, "I know. It's real, and this is what it means." This slow, careful approach hints at why such meticulous preparation is deemed necessary. The psychological adaptation to a confirmed alien reality is not trivial. It demands a fundamental shift in our cosmic identity, from being the apex intelligence on a lonely planet to being a young species in a populated, ancient, and likely bewildering universe. Our science, our philosophies, and our theologies would require profound integration. The Greys, if they are benevolent guides, would understand that this ego death of a species must be managed with care to avoid a catastrophic descent into fear, superstition, or nihilism. Their occasional harsh methods with individuals might be seen as a necessary stress test, fortifying a few to later help the many. The ultimate goal of this preparation points toward the bigger picture beyond Earth. It suggests humanity is being groomed for integration into a wider cosmic community. This is not about conquest or colonization, but about graduation. The lessons in planetary stewardship, the expansion of individual consciousness, the development of psychic unity, these are all prerequisites for a species ready to engage with other civilizations in a stable, ethical, and coherent manner. We are being taught to clean our room, resolve our violent conflicts, and mature emotionally and spiritually so that we might one day be invited to join the conversation happening in the galactic commons. This vision transforms the Grey presence from a looming threat or a curious anomaly into the most significant tutorial in human history. Their agenda, in this light, is one of profound patience. They are the gardeners who will not force the bud to bloom, but who carefully adjust the soil, the light, and the water, ensuring the plant is strong enough to bear the flower when its season finally arrives. The hybrid program, the implants, even the abductions, could be recontextualized within this vast timeline not as violations, but as incomprehensibly long-term biospiritual engineering, ensuring the human genotype and consciousness are compatible with, and ready for, a destiny among the stars. But preparing us for what? The answer might be closer than we think, not in their distant stars, but in the quiet, unfolding potential within the human spirit itself. To view the gray phenomenon solely through the lens of the last century is to see only the most recent ripple in a very deep pond. If we gently sift through the sands of human history, we find intriguing artifacts and stories that shimmer with a familiar, unsettling resonance. The sleek, gray figure of the modern UFO narrative may not be a new invention, but a contemporary name for a visitor that has walked the edges of human awareness for millennia. By tracing these ancient echoes, we can begin to wonder if the phenomenon is not a product of our technological age, but a constant, subtle companion throughout our long journey. Our earliest canvases are the walls of caves and cliffs, and upon them, we find curious silhouettes. In the cave paintings of Val Camonica, Italy, dating back over 10,000 years, figures are depicted with large, round heads and slender bodies, often surrounded by strange, disc-shaped objects. The Wandjina rock art of the Kimberley region in Australia, sacred to Aboriginal peoples, shows majestic, ghostly beings with large, dark eyes, no mouths, and halos or helmets around their heads, a description that stirs a modern recognition. In the American Southwest, petroglyphs carved into desert rock feature humanoid forms with antennae or radiating lines from their heads, seemingly interacting with celestial objects. These are not literal photographs, but they feel like attempts to render the ineffable, to capture encounters with beings of power and otherness using the symbolic language of the time. The oral traditions of indigenous peoples across the globe are rich with what they often call star people or sky beings. The Hopi speak of the Kachina, spirit messengers from the stars who came to teach and guide. The Dogon tribe of Mali possessed, long before modern astronomy, precise knowledge of Sirius and its invisible companion star, which they attributed to amphibious beings from that system. In the Andes, pre-Incan legends tell of the Ohure, celestial teachers. Across the Pacific, various Polynesian cultures recount ancestors arriving from the Pleiades. While these beings are woven into spiritual and cosmological frameworks, their core description as knowledgeable visitors from the heavens, sometimes small and large-eyed, forms a persistent archetype that predates global media by centuries. Historical texts, often dismissed as myth or allegory, contain passages that give one pause. In the Sanskrit epic, the Mahabharata, there are descriptions of vimanas, flying chariots, and battles in the sky involving powerful weapons that sound unnervingly modern. The Hebrew book of Ezekiel famously describes a wondrous, complex, wheel within a wheel descending from the sky, accompanied by beings with faces of a man, a lion, an ox, and an eagle, a possible metaphorical interpretation of a non-human intelligence. Medieval chronicles, like the Annales Larissenses from 9th century France, document aerial phenomena and ships in the clouds. These are not clear-cut reports of grays, but they are records of profound aerial anomalies and non-human interactions that disrupted the worldview of their time, just as they do today. The true mystery lies in the consistency across these disparate cultures and epochs. Isolated peoples on different continents, with no possible means of communication, depicted similar ideas, beings descending from the sky, possessing advanced knowledge or technology, and interacting with humanity. The Wandjina of Australia, the ant people of the Hopi, and the star teachers of the Dogon share a family resemblance not in precise detail, but in narrative function and suggestive form. This consistency argues against the modern gray being a purely cultural construct born of film and television. It suggests instead that the construct is built upon a much older, deeper substrate of experience, one that each culture interpreted and dressed in its own symbolic clothing. This historical thread forces us to expand our thinking about time and contact. Perhaps the phenomenon is not linear but cyclical, appearing in waves throughout human development. Maybe these ancient encounters represent a different mode of interaction, one suited to a less technologically advanced, more spiritually receptive humanity. The Greys of today, with their clinical focus on biology and physics, might be the same intelligence engaging with a species that has now developed the language of science, meeting us on the new terms we ourselves have created. Thus, we are left with a gentle, profound puzzle that challenges the notion of the Grey as a purely modern icon. If the Greys are a modern phenomenon, how do we explain these ancient records? The cave walls, the oral histories, and the cryptic texts do not provide definitive answers, but they whisper of a long-term relationship. They suggest that our current fascination is not a beginning, but merely the latest chapter in an ongoing story, a story of visitation and observation that is woven into the very fabric of human history, waiting patiently for us to recognize its full pattern. While ancient whispers hinted at a presence, the mid-20th century delivered a thunderclap that permanently altered humanity's relationship with the idea of otherworldly visitors. This is the era when the phenomenon stepped out of folklore and into headlines, when the silhouette of the gray alien was etched definitively onto the modern mind. It was a convergence of world events, personal trauma, and burgeoning media that transformed a scattered mystery into a focused cultural obsession, creating the archetype we recognize today. The starting point for this modern chapter is indelibly marked. July 1947, Roswell, New Mexico. The U.S. Army's initial press release announcing the recovery of a flying disc was a seismic event, followed quickly by a retraction labeling it a mundane weather balloon. This swift about-face did not quell curiosity, it ignited it. The whispers began, whispers of strange, metallic debris inscribed with unknown symbols, and most pivotally, whispers of bodies. Though descriptions were initially vague, the idea that non-human pilots might have been recovered entered the public imagination like a seed finding fertile soil. Roswell created a template of official secrecy and public fascination, establishing the narrative of a government hiding the truth about crashed craft and alien beings, a narrative that would fuel decades of speculation. If Roswell provided the catalyst, the case of Betty and Barney Hill in 1961 provided the blueprint. Their story, revealed through hypnotic regression years after a terrifying night on a lonely New Hampshire road, was the first widely publicized account to detail the now classic abduction scenario. Under hypnosis, Betty Hill described the beings with chilling specificity: short, humanoid figures with large, wraparound eyes, grayish skin, and small noses and mouths. She even famously drew a sketch of their faces, a sketch that would become a foundational image. This was no longer about debris in a desert. This was a personal, psychological, and physical interaction. The Hills' testimony moved the phenomenon from the external realm of objects in the sky to the internal realm of human experience, giving a face, a specific, gray face, to the unknown intelligence. Following these two pillars, the gray archetype began to crystallize in the public consciousness. Throughout the 1960s and 70s, as more abduction accounts surfaced from individuals who had no contact with each other, the descriptions consistently aligned. The small stature, the large head, the enormous dark eyes, the gray skin. These features coalesced into a stable, recognizable image. It became the standard model, the default alien. This consistency across independent witnesses was deeply compelling, suggesting a shared external reality rather than individual fantasy. This period also saw the formal, if secretive, interest of governments. The U.S. Air Force's Project Blue Book, 1952 to 1969, publicly investigated sightings, often offering conventional explanations, but its very existence legitimized public discussion. Behind the scenes, however, rumors swirled of deeper investigations, recovered materials, and official panels like the alleged Robertson panel that recommended debunking the phenomenon to manage public opinion. This dance between official denial and clandestine interest reinforced the public's belief that something truly extraordinary was being hidden, with the gray figure at the center of the secret. As the archetype solidified, a profound cultural shift occurred in how aliens were depicted. The friendly, bug-eyed little green man of 1950s B-movies gradually gave way to a more serious, enigmatic, and unsettling figure. Films and television began to reflect the emerging abduction lore. The gray became a symbol not of campy invasion, but of profound mystery, of cold intellect, and of a cosmic agenda beyond human understanding. This created a feedback loop. Media depictions influenced what people might expect to see, yet those very depictions were based on the growing body of witness testimony. Thus, the modern era of the gray was born from this perfect storm: a famous crash, a deeply personal abduction story, consistent witness reports, government secrecy, and a media machine eager to tell the new, compelling story. A collective image was forged, one that has proven incredibly durable. From that moment forward, the gray became synonymous with alien contact. But why this particular form? Its dominance in our imagination suggests it carries a profound symbolic weight, representing not just an alien, but the very essence of the other, the intelligent, inscrutable, and technologically superior observer that our modern, scientific age both fears and yearns to meet. While stories captivate the imagination, the search for the gray phenomenon inevitably leads to a quiet, persistent question: is there anything left behind? Beyond the vivid memories and emotional testimonials, does this mysterious interaction leave a tangible imprint on our physical world? The investigation turns to the subtle, often overlooked, forensic whispers, the physical traces that hint at a reality operating just beyond the edge of our understanding. These traces do not shout their truth, but whisper it in the language of bent grass, anomalous metals, and altered biology. Among the most documented forms of physical evidence are landing traces. These are marks left on the ground at sites where witnesses report a craft has touched down or hovered low. The most common are geometric patterns of depressed or scorched grass and soil, often in circular or triangular formations. The vegetation within these patterns can be dehydrated, bleached, or even crystallized, as if subjected to intense, focused energy. In some cases, soil samples from within these marks show changes to their crystalline structure or magnetic properties, and the ground itself may resist regrowth for years. These are not simple impressions. They suggest an interaction with a force or technology that applies energy in a way that fundamentally alters local materials at a molecular level. Perhaps the most intimate and controversial pieces of physical evidence are the so-called implants. Numerous experiencers report the sensation of small objects being inserted into their bodies during encounters, often in soft tissues like the sinus cavity, behind the ear, or in a limb. When surgically removed, these objects are typically tiny, often metallic or biological in appearance, and surrounded by unusual, non-inflamed tissue. Analysis of some of these objects has yielded perplexing results. They are sometimes composed of exotic alloys or crystalline structures not used in standard medical or manufacturing processes. Some have been reported to emit strange radio frequencies or exhibit unusual magnetic properties. While skeptics argue they could be mundane objects or shrapnel, the consistency of their location in experiencers and their anomalous composition presents a quiet, physical mystery. On the bodies of experiencers themselves, unexplained scars and marks frequently appear after an encounter. These are not random cuts or bruises. They are often precise, small, scoop-like depressions where tissue seems to have been cleanly removed, straight-line incisions that heal with minimal scarring, or puncture wounds in pairs or specific patterns. Burn marks, sometimes in geometric shapes, have also been reported, as have temporary reddening or rashes and patterns that resemble radiation exposure. These marks lack conventional explanations and often appear overnight without any remembered cause, serving as silent, physical corroboration of a deeply personal and inexplicable event. In a number of high-strangeness landing cases, investigators with Geiger counters have detected elevated levels of background radiation at the precise site of the reported encounter. This radiation is usually not dangerously high, but it is statistically significant compared to the surrounding area. In some instances, witnesses who stood close to a landed or low-hovering craft later reported symptoms consistent with mild radiation sickness, nausea, headaches, and skin irritation. This suggests that whatever propulsion or field technology is involved may have a radioactive component, or may interact with local atmospheric particles in a way that ionizes them, leaving a faint, decaying signature of the event. The physical effects on witnesses extend beyond immediate burns or rashes. Some report sudden onset of illnesses, from persistent migraines and immune system disorders to unusual sensitivities to light or electromagnetic fields. Paradoxically, others report the opposite: inexplicable healings of chronic conditions or a sudden boost in vitality following an encounter. These biological effects point to an interaction that goes beyond the psychological, directly impacting the human body's complex systems in ways that are unpredictable and poorly understood, suggesting a technology that can manipulate biological processes at a fundamental level. Despite these intriguing clues, the analysis of physical evidence is fraught with limitations and enduring mysteries. Samples can be contaminated, hoaxes can be fabricated, and the mainstream scientific community remains largely unwilling to engage with materials of such controversial provenance. Furthermore, the evidence often feels tantalizingly incomplete: a strange metal fragment, but not the whole craft; a radiation spike, but no clear source; a scar, but no instrument that made it. It forms a mosaic where the overall picture remains frustratingly out of focus. The evidence exists, quietly compelling in its persistence, but what does it really tell us? It tells us something physically interactive is occurring, something that leaves a mark on our world and our bodies. Yet, in classic fashion for this phenomenon, the evidence deepens the mystery as much as it illuminates it, pointing toward a technology and an intent that remains just beyond our grasp. While stories captivate the imagination, the search for the gray phenomenon inevitably leads to a quiet, persistent question: is there anything left behind? Beyond the vivid memories and emotional testimonials, does this mysterious interaction leave a tangible imprint on our physical world? The investigation turns to the subtle, often overlooked, forensic whispers, the physical traces that hint at a reality operating just beyond the edge of our understanding. These traces do not shout their truth, but whisper it in the language of bent grass, anomalous metals, and altered biology. Among the most documented forms of physical evidence are landing traces. These are marks left on the ground at sites where witnesses report a craft has touched down or hovered low. The most common are geometric patterns of depressed or scorched grass and soil, often in circular or triangular formations. The vegetation within these patterns can be dehydrated, bleached, or even crystallized, as if subjected to intense, focused energy. In some cases, soil samples from within these marks show changes to their crystalline structure or magnetic properties, and the ground itself may resist regrowth for years. These are not simple impressions. They suggest an interaction with a force or technology that applies energy in a way that fundamentally alters local materials at a molecular level. Perhaps the most intimate and controversial pieces of physical evidence are the so-called implants. Numerous experiencers report the sensation of small objects being inserted into their bodies during encounters, often in soft tissues like the sinus cavity, behind the ear, or in a limb. When surgically removed, These objects are typically tiny, often metallic or biological in appearance, and surrounded by unusual, non-inflamed tissue. Analysis of some of these objects has yielded perplexing results. They are sometimes composed of exotic alloys or crystalline structures not used in standard medical or manufacturing processes. Some have been reported to emit strange radio frequencies or exhibit unusual magnetic properties. While skeptics argue they could be mundane objects or shrapnel, the consistency of their location in experiencers and their anomalous composition presents a quiet, physical mystery. On the bodies of experiencers themselves, unexplained scars and marks frequently appear after an encounter. These are not random cuts or bruises. They are often precise, small, scoop-like depressions where tissue seems to have been cleanly removed, straight-line incisions that heal with minimal scarring, or puncture wounds in pairs or specific patterns. Burn marks, sometimes in geometric shapes, have also been reported, as have temporary reddening or rashes in patterns that resemble radiation exposure. These marks lack conventional explanations and often appear overnight without any remembered cause, serving as silent, physical corroboration of a deeply personal and inexplicable event. In a number of high-strangeness landing cases, investigators with Geiger counters have detected elevated levels of background radiation at the precise site of the reported encounter. This radiation is usually not dangerously high, but it is statistically significant compared to the surrounding area. In some instances, witnesses who stood close to a landed or low-hovering craft later reported symptoms consistent with mild radiation sickness, nausea, headaches, and skin irritation. This suggests that whatever propulsion or field technology is involved may have a radioactive component, or may interact with local atmospheric particles in a way that ionizes them, leaving a faint, decaying signature of the event. The physical effects on witnesses extend beyond immediate burns or rashes. Some report sudden onset of illnesses, from persistent migraines and immune system disorders to unusual sensitivities to light or electromagnetic fields. Paradoxically, others report the opposite: inexplicable healings of chronic conditions or a sudden boost in vitality following an encounter. These biological effects point to an interaction that goes beyond the psychological, directly impacting the human body's complex systems in ways that are unpredictable and poorly understood, suggesting a technology that can manipulate biological processes at a fundamental level. Despite these intriguing clues, the analysis of physical evidence is fraught with limitations and enduring mysteries. Samples can be contaminated, hoaxes can be fabricated, and the mainstream scientific community remains largely unwilling to engage with materials of such controversial provenance. Furthermore, the evidence often feels tantalizingly incomplete: a strange metal fragment, but not the whole craft; a radiation spike, but no clear source; a scar, but no instrument that made it. It forms a mosaic where the overall picture remains frustratingly out of focus. The evidence exists, quietly compelling in its persistence, but what does it really tell us? It tells us something physically interactive is occurring, something that leaves a mark on our world and our bodies. Yet, in classic fashion for this phenomenon, the evidence deepens the mystery as much as it illuminates it, pointing toward a technology and an intent that remains just beyond our grasp. In the absence of a captured craft or an officially verified body, the case for the gray phenomenon rests, to a large degree, on human testimony. This might seem like a fragile foundation, but when we step back and examine the sheer breadth and quality of those who have come forward, the picture grows more substantial. It is a tapestry woven not from the threads of a fringe few, but from the consistent, often reluctant, accounts of individuals from every stratum of society, whose credibility compels us to listen, even when the story they tell defies belief. Perhaps the most weighty testimonies come from within the world's most rigidly hierarchical and skeptical institutions, the military. For decades, pilots, radar operators, and naval officers have reported encounters with objects exhibiting physics-defying capabilities. More recently, individuals like Commander David Fravor, who engaged the Tic Tac UAP in 2004, have spoken publicly with sober, technical detail. While these reports typically focus on the craft's performance, the implication of a non-human intelligence is clear. These are trained observers, experts in aerial identification, risk-averse by profession, whose careers are often harmed, not helped, by coming forward. Their credibility is bolstered by sensor data, radar traces, FLIR footage that corroborates their visual accounts, lending a tangible, technological echo to their words. Beyond individual accounts are powerful multiple witness events, where the same extraordinary sight is seen by dozens, hundreds, or even thousands of people simultaneously. The 1997 Phoenix Lights are a prime example, where a vast, silent V-shaped craft drifted across Arizona, witnessed by everyone from the governor to terrified families. In such cases, the chance of mass hallucination or individual fabrication vanishes. When air traffic controllers, police officers, and school teachers all independently describe the same silent, city block-sized object, the event moves from the subjective into the realm of objective, shared reality. These events provide a crucial anchor, demonstrating that the phenomenon manifests in a way that can be perceived collectively. The testimonies of children add another compelling layer. Young witnesses, often untouched by UFO literature or cultural bias, provide raw, unfiltered accounts. Psychologists note that children are generally poor liars when it comes to complex, sustained narratives, and their drawings of encounters frequently match the adult gray archetype with startling accuracy: the large heads, the dark eyes, the slender bodies. The emotional consistency is also telling. Children often describe a sense of wonder or friendly curiosity, rather than the terror adults might project onto them. When these children grow into adults and maintain the same story without deviation, it carries a particular resonance of an authentic, unshakable memory. This consistency transcends not only age, but culture and geography. A farmer in rural France, a nurse in Brazil, a police officer in South Africa, and a businessman in Japan, all with no connection to one another, can provide descriptions of the gray beings that are functionally interchangeable. The core physical attributes remain stubbornly constant: the stature, the skin tone, the eyes, the demeanor. This cross-cultural uniformity argues powerfully against the psychosocial hypothesis that these images are purely products of local media or folklore. It suggests a common external stimulus, an objective phenomenon that presents itself in the same way to human perception, regardless of the witness's cultural background. Psychological evaluations of those claiming repeated contact or experiencers further complicate easy dismissal. While some individuals displaying clear psychological issues have undoubtedly made claims, studies of broader experiencer groups, like those conducted by researchers such as Dr. John Mack at Harvard, found the majority to be psychologically healthy, high-functioning individuals. They were not prone to fantasy or psychosis. In fact, many displayed symptoms consistent with post-traumatic stress, but from a trauma with no conventional cause. Their struggle was not with delusion, but with integration, how to make sense of a real experience that has no place in consensus reality. When we step back to view this panorama of testimony, from the decorated pilot to the traumatized child, from the mass sighting to the solitary encounter, a simple, logical question arises. Can they all be wrong? Can a global pattern of such specificity emerge from millions of individual lies, hallucinations, or misidentifications? The law of probability suggests otherwise. The convergence of detail from such disparate, credible sources forms a kind of evidence in itself. When credible witnesses from all walks of life report the same beings, we must ask ourselves, what are they really seeing? The answer seems to point toward an objective, if bizarre, reality that interacts with humanity, a reality that is perceived with remarkable consistency by the human mind, leaving behind a trail of stories that are too aligned and too persistent to ignore. Beyond personal testimony and physical traces lies a third, more formal category of evidence, the paper trail of governments themselves. This is the realm of declassified memos, official investigations, and heavily redacted reports, a world where the dry language of bureaucracy brushes up against the extraordinary. The official stance has long been one of dismissal or silence, but a careful reading of the documents they have released and the investigations they have openly admitted to conducting paints a more complex and intriguing picture. The most famous public-facing investigation was the U.S. Air Force's Project Blue Book, which ran from 1952 to 1969. Its public conclusion was that no UFO posed a threat to national security or represented technological leaps beyond modern science. However, a closer look at Blue Book's own files is revealing. Of the 12,618 sightings it investigated, 701 remained officially unidentified. These were cases where trained investigators could find no prosaic explanation despite having access to military and aviation data. Furthermore, internal memos and the later released Condor report revealed that Blue Book's public mission of investigation was, in part, a tool for managing public opinion and defusing potential panic, suggesting a deeper, less publicized concern about the phenomenon's reality. The Freedom of Information Act, FOIA, has been a powerful tool for researchers, prying loose thousands of pages of documents from agencies like the CIA, FBI, and NSA. These pages form a fragmented mosaic. They include internal memos discussing this serious concern over UFOs in the 1950s, analyses of foreign powers' interest in the phenomenon, and agent reports on civilian contactee groups. While they rarely mention gray aliens explicitly, they consistently treat UFOs as a matter of serious intelligence interest, not fantasy. The heavy redactions, entire paragraphs or pages blacked out for national security, speak volumes. They tell us that the topic, even in decades-old documents, is still considered sensitive enough to conceal from the public eye. Interspersed with these bureaucratic documents are more dramatic military encounter reports. Declassified Navy and Air Force files detail instances where jet interceptors were scrambled to pursue objects that outmaneuvered them, or where missile systems malfunctioned as unidentified craft hovered nearby. The 2004 Nimitz incident reports, though slow to emerge, detail a multi-day encounter with the Tic Tac UAP, confirmed by radar, infrared, and visual observation from highly trained personnel. These are not reports of distant lights, but of intelligently controlled objects interacting with and demonstrating superiority over the pinnacle of human military technology. In recent years, the official stance has shifted from blanket denial to a startling, if limited, acknowledgement. The Pentagon's 2021 UAP, Unidentified Aerial Phenomena, Task Force Report, and its successor, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO, marked a watershed. While carefully avoiding terms like alien, the report confirmed that UAP are real, pose a flight safety and national security challenge, and exhibit flight characteristics unknown to current U.S. technology. Senior intelligence officials and military commanders now speak openly about the phenomenon in congressional hearings. This represents a monumental shift. Governments are no longer simply saying, nothing's there. They are admitting, there is something there, and we don't know what it is. So, what have governments officially admitted? They have admitted that objects of unknown origin and capability operate with impunity in restricted airspace. They have admitted that these objects exhibit physics-defying maneuvers. They have admitted to spending millions of dollars over decades to study the issue, both publicly and, almost certainly, far more intensively in secret. They have created permanent offices to investigate it. This is a far cry from the days of Project Blue Book's closure and the declaration that the topic was dead. Yet, for all this new transparency, a vast chasm remains between what is admitted and what is likely known. The core questions, origins, intent, biology of any occupants, recovered materials, remain shrouded in classification. The rationale is always national security, a term that can cover everything from protecting exotic sensor capabilities to managing the societal impact of a potentially earth-shattering revelation. This enduring secrecy is, in itself, a form of evidence. It leads to the quiet, logical conundrum that closes this chapter of our investigation. If there's nothing to the gray alien phenomenon, why do governments continue to investigate and classify? The continued investment of resources and the persistent veil of secrecy suggest they, too, are searching for answers to a mystery they find both real and profoundly consequential. When faced with the enigmatic figure of the gray, the human mind naturally reaches for the most familiar framework, the star map. Are they simply beings from another planet, astronauts from a distant world whose biology and technology have evolved under a different sun? This is the extraterrestrial hypothesis, ETH, the classic and most intuitively grasped explanation. While it presents staggering challenges, it also rests upon a foundation of growing astronomical discovery and a simple, compelling cosmic logic. In a universe this vast and ancient, we are almost certainly not alone. The conversation often begins with the Drake equation, a thought experiment formulated by astronomer Frank Drake in 1961. It's not a formula with one answer, but a framework for considering the variables involved in the existence of communicative civilizations. The rate of star formation, the fraction of stars with planets, the number of habitable planets per system, the likelihood of life arising, of intelligence evolving, of technology developing, and the lifespan of such a civilization. Plugging in modern estimates, with thousands of exoplanets now confirmed, even conservative calculations suggest the number of technological civilizations in our galaxy alone could be in the tens or hundreds. The universe, it seems, has had both the ingredients and the time for life to arise elsewhere, many times over. The primary hurdle for the ETH is not probability, but practicality, interstellar travel. The distances between stars are almost incomprehensibly vast. Using our current rocketry, a journey to the nearest star system, Proxima Centauri, would take tens of thousands of years. For the Greys to be interstellar tourists, they would need technology that fundamentally bypasses or manipulates the constraints of space-time as we understand it. Theorists speculate about concepts like warp drives, which compress space ahead of a craft and expand it behind, traversable wormholes, acting as cosmic shortcuts, or generation ships, vast arcs where entire civilizations live and die during the voyage. Their silent, physics-defying craft, as described in Encounters, suggest a propulsion system so advanced it appears as magic to us, perhaps harnessing dark energy or manipulating gravity itself. Given the immense effort such travel would require, why would they come here? Earth, to a cosmic observer, presents several compelling features. We are a vibrant biological oasis, a rare water world teeming with complex life in a galaxy that may be largely sterile. Our planet's biological diversity, including the curious, tool-using primate known as humanity, would be of immense scientific interest. Furthermore, our technological adolescence, marked by radio waves, nuclear explosions, and environmental change, might act as a beacon, signaling that a species on this planet has reached a volatile, self-dangerous, and therefore interesting, stage of development worthy of monitoring. Modern astronomy fuels this hypothesis powerfully. The Kepler and TESS space telescopes have revealed that planets are not the exception, but the rule. We now know of thousands of exoplanets, with many located in their star's habitable zone, the region where liquid water could exist. Some of these are rocky, Earth-sized worlds. The discovery that the basic building blocks of life, complex organic molecules, are abundant in interstellar space and on asteroids suggests the ingredients for life are cosmic commonplaces. The galaxy is not an empty desert. It is a seething nursery of potential worlds, making the existence of another civilization not just possible, but increasingly plausible. We must also consider the immense scales of cosmic time. Our galaxy is over 13 billion years old. If a civilization arose just a few million years before us, a mere blink in galactic history, it would have had ample time to master interstellar travel, explore the galaxy, and establish a presence. They could have been observing Earth for eons, watching dinosaurs roam, hominids evolve, and civilization flicker into being. Their patience would be that of geologists, not humans. Our entire recorded history is but a single page in a library they have been curating for millennia. This leads to the final, humbling consideration, the likelihood of a civilization far more advanced than our own. Human technology has advanced exponentially in just the last 200 years. A civilization with a mere 10,000-year head start could possess capabilities we cannot even conceptualize. To them, we might appear as a fascinating but fragile ecological preserve, or a promising but troubled student species. The Greys, within the ETH, would represent such a civilization, one that has solved the problems of energy, disease, and perhaps even mortality, turning its attention to the grand project of cosmic exploration and stewardship. But if they're from another planet, how did they get here? And more importantly, how long have they been watching? The answer to the first question lies in a physics we have yet to discover. The answer to the second may be written in our own ancient myths and in the quiet, patient pattern of their appearances throughout human history. As vast as space is, there is another frontier equally profound and far less understood, the hidden dimensions of reality itself. When the nuts and bolts model of interstellar travel strains against the paradoxes of the phenomenon, a more elegant, if more mind-bending, theory emerges. What if the Greys are not interstellar voyagers, but interdimensional neighbors? This theory suggests they exist not light years away, but in a reality that is coterminous with our own, separated not by distance, but by a shift in frequency or vibrational state, a reality from which they can sometimes step into ours, and from which we occasionally catch a glimpse. This idea finds a curious echo in the language of modern theoretical physics. String theory and M-theory, while still unproven, posit that our universe may consist of up to 11 dimensions, most of which are curled up at a subatomic scale, imperceptible to us. Some physicists speculate that these extra dimensions could harbor whole other realities, parallel universes with different physical laws. While this remains in the realm of advanced hypothesis, it provides a scientific metaphor for the possibility of other planes of existence. The Greys, in this view, might be beings from one of these adjacent dimensions, for whom travel to our world is less about crossing space and more about tuning into our specific vibrational frequency, like changing the channel on a cosmic radio. This framework elegantly explains one of the most common and baffling aspects of Grey encounters, their sudden, silent appearance and disappearance. Witnesses consistently describe craft and beings that materialize and dematerialize, fade in and out of solidity, or simply vanish in the blink of an eye. These are not the behaviors of a craft accelerating to relativistic speeds. They are the hallmarks of something transitioning between states of being. They phase into our perceptual bandwidth, interact, and then phase out again. Their silent, gravity-defying movements could be artifacts of this partial existence in our dimension, where they are not fully subject to our laws of inertia and thermodynamics. The theory also offers a fresh perspective on the profound mental and consciousness-related aspects of contact. If consciousness itself is a fundamental property of the universe, not merely a byproduct of the brain, then it might be the key that unlocks dimensional access. The Greys, possessing a mastery of consciousness far beyond ours, might use focused intent or advanced technology to modulate their vibrational state and that of their craft, allowing a temporary intersection with our physical plane. Similarly, their telepathic communication could be a natural function of interacting within a shared field of consciousness that exists across dimensions, bypassing our crude, localized sensory apparatus. Parallel universe theories add another layer of fascinating speculation. Perhaps the Greys are not aliens at all, but future humans or a divergent branch of our own evolutionary tree from a parallel Earth. In a reality where a different historical or evolutionary path was taken, they developed a form that seems alien to us. Their interest in our biology, their collection of genetic material, and their warnings about our future could then be seen not as an alien agenda, but as a form of self-preservation or historical study, a civilization examining its own past or a neighboring, more volatile timeline. Their appearance would be a reflection of a possible human future, one where intellect and technology have advanced at the expense of the physical form we recognize. Ultimately, the interdimensional theory shines a clarifying light on the high strangeness, the paranormal aspects that cling to the Grey phenomenon like mist. It explains why they leave such ambiguous physical evidence. Their interaction with our matter is temporary and unstable. It accounts for the psychic components, the manipulation of time and memory, and the feeling witnesses describe of reality itself being thin or flexible in their presence. These are the expected side effects of an intelligence operating from a framework where mind and matter are more fluidly connected than in our own. The phenomenon isn't breaking the laws of physics. It is operating under a broader set of laws we have not yet discovered. This perspective invites a profound shift in how we view our place in the cosmos. We are not simply on a planet in space. We are in a specific vibrational domain within a multi-layered reality. The stars are not just distant suns, but possibly markers or intersections with other dimensional layers. The Grey becomes a symbol not of distance, but of depth, a reminder that reality is far more layered and mysterious than it appears. Perhaps they're not coming from across space, but from right beside us in dimensions we cannot perceive, separated by the thinnest of veils, waiting for us to develop the perceptual tools to truly see and understand our neighbors. We have considered the Greys as visitors from distant stars and as neighbors from hidden dimensions. Yet there remains a third, more intimate frontier of possibility, one that looks not outward, but inward. This is the consciousness connection, a theory proposing that the phenomenon is not fundamentally external or physical in the conventional sense, but an interaction with the deepest, most enigmatic aspect of our own existence, the nature of mind itself. In this view, the Grey is not an alien, but an archetype emerging from and interacting with the vast, non-local ocean of human and universal consciousness. Modern consciousness studies are beginning to chip away at the materialist assumption that the brain produces consciousness like a generator produces electricity. Pioneering work in fields like quantum biology and the study of near-death experiences suggests consciousness might be a fundamental property of the universe, a field, like gravity, that the brain receives and focuses rather than creates. This concept of non-local awareness implies that mind is not locked inside our skulls, but is interconnected and boundless. The Greys reported telepathic abilities, their seeming ability to know a witness's thoughts, and their manipulation of memory could be explained if they are operating within this same conscious field, but with far greater mastery over its properties and potentials. This directly relates to the long history of telepathy research. often sidelined by mainstream science, but persistently documented. The Gray's primary mode of communication, direct, conceptual transfer, mirrors the descriptions of telepathic phenomena in human-to-human studies. Their communication isn't a technology in the sense of a radio. It might be a natural, evolved skill of a consciousness-based intelligence. Their large, dark eyes, so often described as windows, could be less for seeing light and more for focusing consciousness, for creating a resonant link with another mind, making the telepathic download or command possible. This theory also offers a compelling explanation for the collective and archetypal nature of the phenomenon. Psychologist Carl Jung suggested the existence of a collective unconscious, a shared reservoir of images, symbols, and instincts common to all humanity. The Gray, in this sense, could be a modern myth, a psychic fact manifesting from this shared depth in response to humanity's technological adolescence and cosmic loneliness. However, the consciousness connection theory takes this a step further. It posits that this archetype is not merely symbolic, but interactive. It can be projected from the collective human psyche with such coherence and force that it can create quasi-physical, shared experiences, what we call encounters. In moments of altered states, trauma, or deep meditation, the veil between individual consciousness and this collective field thins, and the archetype manifests. This leads to a radical idea that reality itself may be a consciousness projection. Philosophies like idealism and interpretations of quantum physics have long suggested that the observed universe is dependent on a conscious observer. If consciousness is primary, then the Grays could be thought forms or conscious agencies that have achieved a degree of objective reality within our shared perceptual agreement. They are as real as anything else we perceive, because perception itself is a creative act of consciousness. Their craft are not machines, but thought forms given temporary coherence and substance by the focused intent of their own consciousness, interacting with the malleable fabric of our own perceived reality. But why would encounters happen? Within this framework, they might serve an evolutionary or pedagogical function for consciousness itself. The shocking, reality-shattering nature of a close encounter could be a catalyst designed to break an individual out of the consensus trance of material reality. It forces the experiencer to question the nature of reality, to expand their awareness, and to awaken to the larger, conscious universe of which they are a part. The phenomenon, therefore, is not about them visiting us. It is about us awakening to a broader truth of existence, with the Gray archetype acting as the startling, enigmatic teacher. This consciousness connection beautifully bridges the often warring camps of scientific and spiritual understanding. For science, it grounds the phenomenon in the emerging study of non-local mind and quantum reality. For spirituality, it validates ancient concepts of interconnectedness, archetypal realms, and the power of consciousness to shape reality. It turns the UFO from a spacecraft into a consciousness ship, a vehicle for expanding human awareness. What if the Grays aren't separate from us at all, but manifestations of something within human consciousness itself, an aspect of our own evolving psyche reaching back to guide, shock, and ultimately integrate us into a fuller understanding of who and what we truly are? This perspective doesn't solve the mystery. It deepens it into the most profound mystery of all, the nature of the mind that is doing the perceiving. An encounter with the Gray presence is rarely a simple event to be filed away. It is more akin to a seismic tremor that reshapes the internal landscape of a life. The aftershocks are not just memories of strange lights and figures, but profound, enduring changes in how a person sees the world, their purpose within it, and their very sense of self. These are stories not merely of witnessing, but of becoming. Narratives where the line between before and after is as stark and defining as the moment of contact itself. The personal testimonies of these transformations share a common emotional arc. There is the initial period of trauma, confusion, and often a desperate attempt to return to normalcy. But as time passes, a shift occurs. One man, a former corporate accountant, describes feeling a sudden, visceral disconnection from the world of spreadsheets and profit margins. The work he had built his identity around now felt meaningless, a game with artificial stakes. Within a year, he left his job, retrained as a wildlife rehabilitator, and now speaks of a fulfillment he never knew existed. "It was like they flipped a switch in me," he says softly. "The noise of the world just faded, and I could finally hear what really mattered." These career changes are remarkably common, and they almost always trend away from material accumulation and towards service, healing, or creative expression. Architects become environmental activists. Lawyers become holistic therapists. Engineers turn to creating art or music that attempts to translate their ineffable experience. The drive is no longer for external validation, but for an internal alignment with a new, expansive understanding of existence. The encounter seems to rewire one's sense of value, placing it on connection, stewardship, and the expression of consciousness rather than on conventional achievement. This fundamental realignment inevitably reshapes relationships. Old friendships based on superficial interests may fade, as the experiencer finds they can no longer engage in trivial gossip or status competition. New relationships are often formed with others who have had similar encounters or who are on a spiritual path, creating bonds of deep, wordless understanding. Family dynamics can become strained or deepened. Some find loved ones dismissive, while others discover a new level of intimacy with a partner who chooses to believe and support them through the confusion. The experiencer's priorities are irrevocably altered, often centered on authenticity, empathy, and the quality of conscious connection. One of the most universally reported aftereffects is the loss of fear of death. The profound sense of being a consciousness temporarily inhabiting a body, often reinforced by out-of-body experiences during the encounter, dismantles the finality of physical demise. Death is no longer seen as an end, but as a transition, a return to a broader state of being. This liberation from existential fear brings a profound peace and a radical freedom to live more fully in the present, unburdened by the ultimate dread that underpins so much human anxiety. Hand in hand with this comes a dramatically increased environmental awareness. Many describe a new, almost empathic connection to the Earth. They feel the planet as a living, conscious entity in distress. The warnings about environmental damage they may have received during contact are no longer abstract concepts, but felt realities. This often translates into concrete action, adopting sustainable lifestyles, dedicating time to conservation, or simply developing a daily practice of mindful appreciation for the natural world. They see humanity not as separate from nature, but as a conscious expression of it, with a duty of care. Ultimately, for many, the journey culminates in what can only be described as a spiritual awakening. The universe ceases to be a cold, mechanical void. It becomes a conscious, intelligent, and purposeful presence. The gray encounter, regardless of its initial terror, is reframed as a spiritual initiation, a harsh but necessary shock to awaken them from the dream of separation. They speak of a direct, experiential knowledge of interconnectedness, of love as a foundational cosmic force, and of their own role, however small, in a vast, unfolding story of consciousness. The fear is integrated, not forgotten, and transformed into a source of compassion and purpose. These encounters don't just change what people believe. They change who they fundamentally are, remolding ordinary individuals into inadvertent mystics, quiet ambassadors of a reality that is far stranger and far more beautiful than they ever dared imagine. The journey after an encounter is rarely one of simple, linear progress. It is a path walked with a paradoxical weight in each hand. In one, there are undeniable gifts, expansions of being that feel like awakening. In the other, there are burdens, wounds, and isolations that can feel like a curse. The life of an experiencer is lived in the tension between these two poles, navigating a reality that has become at once more magical and more lonely than they ever thought possible. Among the most commonly reported gifts are the emergence or sharpening of psychic and intuitive abilities. A woman who could never sense a lie finds she now knows, with a bone-deep certainty, when someone is being deceptive. A man discovers he can ease chronic pain in others with a focused intention, a skill he never sought. Others report heightened empathy, clairvoyant dreams, or a sudden understanding of complex scientific or spiritual concepts they've never studied. These abilities feel like the unlocking of a dormant human potential, a side effect of having their consciousness tuned or amplified by the encounter. They are tools of deeper perception, offering a glimpse into a more interconnected and fluid reality. Yet, this opening often comes at a severe cost. For many, the primary burden is a form of post-traumatic stress that is profoundly difficult to treat because its cause is not recognized by mainstream psychology. The trauma is not from a car crash or combat, but from a violation of reality itself. Flashbacks, night terrors, and hypervigilance are common. The fear is not just of the event, but of its implications, the loss of a stable, knowable world. This PTSD is compounded by the lack of societal validation, leaving the experiencer to process a deeply traumatic event in total isolation, often doubting their own sanity in the process. This leads directly to another heavy burden: social isolation and ridicule. Sharing such an experience risks everything. Friends may withdraw, fearing instability. Family may react with dismissive concern, urging them to see a doctor. In professional settings, keeping the secret becomes a constant, exhausting act of self-censorship. The experiencer lives with a double life: the outward persona that functions in consensus reality, and the inward self that holds a cosmic secret. This isolation can be crippling, creating a profound loneliness, a sense of being a permanent outsider in the very human community they once felt part of. Conversely, one of the most powerful sustaining gifts is the emergence of a deep, unwavering sense of mission or purpose. Even amidst the trauma, many feel a clear, if enigmatic, calling. It might be to create art that bridges worlds, to heal others, to protect the environment, or to gently prepare those around them for a broader cosmic perspective. This mission becomes the compass by which they navigate their transformed life. It provides meaning to the suffering and a reason to integrate the experience rather than be destroyed by it. The burden of knowledge becomes the gift of direction. For a significant number, the contact is not a single event, but an ongoing relationship. They experience repeated visitations, telepathic communications, or synchronicities that feel guided. This can be both a gift and an immense burden. The gift is the continued confirmation that they are not insane, that the connection is real. The burden is the loss of any semblance of a normal, predictable life. They may feel they are never truly alone, that their life path is being influenced or directed by an outside intelligence. This ongoing contact demands constant integration and adjustment, a lifelong process of making peace with being a participant in a mysterious, ongoing interaction. The ultimate challenge, then, is integration. This is the lifelong work of weaving the extraordinary threads of the encounter into the fabric of everyday existence. It involves learning to hold the paradox, to carry the awe without being consumed by it, to bear the trauma without being defined by it. It means finding a way to use the newfound psychic sensitivity without being overwhelmed by the emotional noise of the world. It requires building a new identity that honors the expanded consciousness while still functioning in a society that does not acknowledge it. This is the central task, to become whole again, not as the person they were before, but as a new synthesis of the human they were and the cosmic awareness they now carry. For every gift received, there seems to be a price. But is the transformation worth the cost? For most who walk this path, the answer, after years of struggle, emerges as a quiet yes. The price is high, but the glimpse beyond the veil, and the person they are forced to become in its light, is considered a profound, if difficult, gift in itself. For decades, those who encountered the gray presence bore their stories in solitude, islands of extraordinary experience in a sea of conventional disbelief. But a remarkable thing has happened over time. These isolated islands have begun to find one another, forming a quiet archipelago of shared understanding. This is the emergence of the experiencer community, a global, often informal network of individuals bound not by dogma, but by a common, reality-shattering event. In coming together, they perform a vital act of mutual healing, transforming isolation into solidarity and personal mystery into collective exploration. The foundation of this community often begins with local support groups. In cities and towns around the world, people gather in living rooms, community centers, or quiet corners of libraries. These are not sensationalist meetings, but solemn spaces of profound relief. Here, for the first time, a person can describe the bright lights, the sterile room, the large dark eyes, and see not fear or mockery, but nods of recognition. A woman can speak of her missing time without being told she drank too much. A man can share his confusing telepathic download without being labeled psychotic. The simple act of being believed, by others who have no reason to doubt because they've lived it too, is a powerful, restorative medicine. This connection expands at dedicated conferences and retreats, often organized by empathetic researchers or fellow experiencers. Events like the Experiencer Research Conference or the International UFO Congress provide a larger sanctuary. Here, the focus shifts from simple support to deeper exploration. People attend workshops on integrating contact, managing psychic abilities, or understanding the spiritual implications. They hear researchers like Dr. John Mack or Jeffrey Kripal speak with academic rigor and deep compassion, validating their experiences within frameworks of psychology, anthropology, and consciousness studies. These gatherings are lifelines, temporary worlds where the strange is normal and the burden of secrecy can be laid down. The digital age has accelerated this community building exponentially. Online forums, private Facebook groups, and encrypted messaging apps have created a global 24/7 haven. An experiencer in Norway can share a waking vision with someone in New Mexico at 2 a.m. and receive instant understanding. They exchange artwork, poetry, and music inspired by their encounters, creating a unique cultural expression of the phenomenon. They share practical advice on dealing with sleep paralysis, navigating medical implants, or talking to therapists. These online spaces are often moderated with great care to foster safety and respect, becoming a vital, invisible web of support that spans the planet. Central to this ecosystem are the researchers, therapists, and doctors who have chosen to listen without judgment. These professionals, clinical psychologists, psychiatrists, neuroscientists, and even former military personnel, provide a crucial bridge between the experiencer's inner world and the external world of accepted discourse. By applying their professional skills to these extraordinary reports, they lend a legitimacy that friends and family cannot. They help experiencers differentiate between psychological illness and the aftereffects of a high-strangeness event, a distinction that is often the first step toward healthy integration. Their work validates not just the individual, but the phenomenon itself as a subject worthy of serious, compassionate attention. Within this community, a collective understanding begins to crystallize. It's not a unified theory, Interpretations range from extraterrestrial to interdimensional to spiritual, but a shared emotional and phenomenological map. They recognize the common landmarks, the pre-event buzzing sound, the blue light, the somatic sensations, the specific emotional tone of the gray presence. This collective database of experience provides a form of validation more powerful than any government document. When hundreds of strangers, with no contact, describe the same minute, bizarre details, it confirms the objective, if elusive, nature of the event. It moves the experience from my hallucination to our mystery. In the end, the greatest gift the experiencer community offers is the dissolution of the profound loneliness that defines the early aftermath of contact. In finding each other, they discover they are not broken, not chosen, not cursed in isolation. They are part of a scattered tribe, a quiet diaspora of those who have glimpsed behind the curtain. This realization fosters a profound shift in perspective. Their transformation is no longer a solitary aberration, but part of a larger, unfolding human story. It suggests that these encounters, however personal, are touching a growing segment of humanity, weaving a new thread into the collective tapestry. In finding each other, experiencers discover something profound. They're not alone, and perhaps, in the grand, mysterious scheme of things, none of us truly are. We are all just waking up to the connections that have always been there, waiting to be seen. When we in the West picture a gray alien, the image that springs to mind is a specific cultural artifact, shaped by a unique constellation of history, philosophy, and media. Our interpretation is not a neutral observation. It is a story we have been telling ourselves for decades, a narrative that reflects our deepest societal values, fears, and aspirations. To understand the Western lens is to understand how we, as a culture, have attempted to domesticate the utterly wild idea of the other by framing it in terms we already know. The most powerful shaper of the Western image is, without doubt, Hollywood. From the ominous saucers of the day the Earth stood still to the terrifying abductors of communion and fire in the sky, and the enigmatic visitors of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, film and television have provided a visual and emotional vocabulary for the phenomenon. Hollywood solidified the gray's physical form, the large head, the dark eyes, and embedded it in the global psyche. More importantly, it established the dominant emotional tones: awe, terror, and a Cold War-era anxiety about infiltration and loss of control. These narratives are less about documenting an objective reality and more about projecting our collective anxieties onto a blank, alien slate. This entertainment lens is reinforced by the West's foundational worldview, scientific materialism. We are a culture that trusts instruments, data, and physical evidence. Consequently, our dominant approach to the phenomenon is forensic. We look for crashed craft, analyze radar data, and seek biological samples. We ask, how does their technology work, more readily than what is their consciousness like? The gray, in this framework, becomes an engineering problem, an advanced, perhaps superior, technological civilization to be reverse-engineered, competed with, or defended against. This lens can overlook the high strangeness, psychic, and spiritual aspects that don't fit the materialist paradigm. This naturally bleeds into the pervasive fear-based and militaristic narratives. Having lived through centuries of colonization and decades of Cold War paranoia, the Western mind is primed to see any unknown, powerful entity as a potential threat. The gray is framed through a defense and security perspective. Are they surveilling us? Testing our defenses? Preparing an invasion? Government programs have historically investigated UFOs under the auspices of national security, and this language has seeped into public discourse. The experiencer becomes a potential victim of an incursion, and the phenomenon is a puzzle to be solved for the safety of the state. This suspicion of authority fuels another quintessentially Western interpretation: conspiracy culture. If the phenomenon is real and the government knows it, then the secrecy is not for our protection, but for theirs. Narratives of hidden treaties, secret energy technologies, and shadow governments collaborating with aliens flourish here. The Gray becomes a player in a vast, hidden power struggle. This perspective is born from a deep, often justified, distrust of institutions, and it casts the entire mystery as a political and informational war between the powerful who know and the public who are kept in the dark. Yet, alongside the fear and suspicion runs a powerful thread of technological fascination. The West venerates progress and innovation. The silent, gravity-defying craft of the Greys represent the ultimate technology, a symbol of a future we both desire and fear. They embody the dream of limitless energy, interstellar travel, and mastery over physics. In this view, Contact is not about spiritual lessons, but about a potential technological windfall. If we could only capture a craft or communicate with the engineers, we could leapfrog millennia of development. The Gray is the ultimate scientist, the possessor of secrets we crave. These overlapping frames, the cinematic, the scientific materialist, the militaristic, the conspiratorial, and the techno-fetishistic, create a complex, often contradictory, Western portrait of the Gray. It is an image colored by paranoia and wonder, by a desire for control and a fear of powerlessness. We have constructed the Gray in our own image, as a superior scientist, a hidden adversary, a technological grail, and a screen for our geopolitical anxieties. But the Western view is just one lens, a product of a specific cultural history. How do other cultures, with different mythologies, spiritual traditions, and relationships with the cosmos, see these same beings? Their interpretations may not simplify the mystery, but they can profoundly expand our understanding of what the encounter might mean. For many Western minds, the idea of the Gray is a shock to a modern system, a rupture in a materialist reality. But for countless indigenous cultures across the globe, the concept of beings from the stars is woven into the very fabric of their understanding of the universe. It is not a breaking news story, but a chapter in a very old book. Their perspectives offer a profound contrast, framing these encounters not as an invasion or a scientific puzzle, but as a relationship, one that carries spiritual responsibility and echoes of ancient kinship. Across continents, traditions speak of the star people or sky beings. The Hopi of the American Southwest recount the Kachinas, spiritual messengers who came from the stars to teach the people agriculture, law, and ceremony before departing, their essence now residing in the sacred masked dancers. In the Amazon, tribes like the Hunniquin speak of the Yusin, spirits of the forest and sky, who can take form and impart healing knowledge. The Aboriginal peoples of Australia maintain the Dreamtime stories of the Wandjina, powerful sky beings who created the land and its laws. These are not myths relegated to a primitive past. They are living histories, maintained through oral tradition, art, and ritual, describing an ongoing cosmic relationship. This worldview integrates these visitors seamlessly into a holistic spiritual ecology. The star people are not separate from nature or the divine. They are part of it. They exist alongside ancestor spirits, earth spirits, and animal guides. For the Lakota, the Wakianjiang, thunder beings, are powerful sky spirits, while the Maya saw celestial events as direct communication from their ancestors and gods in the stars. In this framework, a sighting or encounter is not an anomaly, but a form of communication within a living, conscious cosmos. It is interpreted through the language of omens, warnings, or confirmations, not through the lens of radar telemetry. Many of these traditions contain prophecies about the return or increased activity of these star nations. The Hopi speak of the Pahana, the true white brother, who will return from the stars with missing elements of their sacred tablets to usher in a new world. Various Andean prophecies speak of a time of great change, the Pachacuti, when the Inca will return, sometimes interpreted as enlightened beings from the stars. These prophecies often tie the visitor's return to a period of Earth's purification or a transition in human consciousness, framing current waves of sightings not as random, but as part of a predicted, cyclical unfolding. This relationship is often managed through specific ceremonies and what could be called contact protocols. These are not attempts at radio communication, but spiritual technologies. Rituals involving specific chants, drumming, plant medicines, or purifications are performed to welcome, honor, or communicate with these beings. The purpose is often to seek guidance, healing, or to maintain harmony between the human, earthly, and celestial realms. The approach is one of respect and reciprocity, acknowledging that interaction with such powers requires proper spiritual etiquette and a clean, balanced heart. This leads to the most striking contrast, an ethos of harmony versus the West's often fear-based approach. Where Western narratives jump to abduction and threat, many indigenous perspectives emphasize connection, teaching, and stewardship. The fear is not of the beings themselves, but of human disharmony that might invite negative manifestations or cause the beings to withdraw their guidance. The focus is on human readiness, on living in right relationship with Earth, which is seen as the prerequisite for positive interaction with the star nations. The problem is not them, but our own spiritual and ecological imbalance. Listening to these traditions invites a humbling shift in perspective. Indigenous peoples have always known. These visitors are neither new nor unexpected. They are part of the family of creation. This view dissolves the dichotomy of us versus them and replaces it with a model of cosmic kinship. It suggests the phenomenon may be less about technology and more about consciousness, less about disclosure from governments and more about readiness of the human heart. It reframes the modern experiencer not as a victim of a new terror, but as someone stumbling, perhaps clumsily, back into a very old and sacred conversation that their culture had simply forgotten how to have. Across the vast intellectual and spiritual landscapes of Asia, the sudden appearance of the modern gray archetype is filtered through philosophical systems millennia old. Here, the encounter is not necessarily a clash with the unknown, but often a meeting that can be contextualized within expansive, pre-existing maps of reality. Eastern thought, with its concepts of multiplicity, consciousness, and cosmic order, provides a framework that can absorb the idea of non-human intelligence not as a contradiction, but as an expected feature of a vast and layered cosmos. Buddhist cosmology offers a particularly elegant framework. It describes innumerable world systems and multiple realms of existence, realms of desire, form, and formlessness, inhabited by a vast array of beings, from hell beings to devas, gods. From this perspective, the Greys could be understood as beings from another loka or realm. Their advanced technology might be seen as a manifestation of their specific karma and the capabilities of their plane of existence. Their clinical detachment could be interpreted not as malevolence, but as a different mode of consciousness, perhaps one less entangled in emotion and desire. The encounter, then, becomes a rare intersection of realms, a teaching on impermanence and the diversity of sentient life within the endless cycle of samsara. Hinduism's ancient texts are replete with references to celestial beings and advanced technologies that feel strikingly resonant. The Vimanas, flying chariots described in texts like the Mahabharata, and the detailed accounts of aerial battles and powerful weapons echo modern UFO reports. Beings like the Devas or Gandharvas are described as possessing great knowledge, beauty, and power, residing in higher planes. The concept of avatara, the descent of a divine consciousness into a form, could even provide a template for understanding why such a being might take a specific, repeatable physical form like the gray to interact with humanity. In this view, they are not aliens from space, but known actors in a grand, cyclical drama of creation and destruction. In East Asian traditions, the interpretation often blends with indigenous folklore and a pragmatic worldview. In Japan, a UFO sighting might be interpreted through the lens of yokai, mysterious phenomena and spirits, or as uchijin, space people, without the overwhelming fear narrative. The focus might be on the phenomenon's effect on harmony and balance. In Chinese thought, influenced by Taoism, such an event might be seen as a manifestation of the mysterious Tao, the ineffable way of the universe, a reminder of the limitless possibilities that lie beyond human understanding. The response is less about defense and more about observation, alignment, and seeking to understand one's place within the newly revealed pattern. The Eastern concept of karma and cosmic purpose deeply informs this perspective. An encounter is seldom seen as random. It is an event laden with meaning, the result of causes and conditions, both personal and collective. For an individual, it might be the fruition of past life connections or a catalyst for spiritual awakening. For humanity, it could be a moment of collective karma, a test, or a step in our species' evolution. This removes the narrative of victimhood. The experiencer is a participant in a meaningful, if mysterious, cosmic process. The Greys themselves are seen as actors within this lawful universe, fulfilling a role or purpose within the great web of cause and effect. This leads to the concept of meditation or spiritually facilitated contact. In many Eastern traditions, advanced states of meditation are said to allow access to other realms and communication with non-physical beings. The disciplined quieting of the mind is seen as a technology for interdimensional travel or perception. From this vantage point, the Grey encounter, especially its telepathic aspects, could be understood not as an abduction, but as a form of contact made possible by a temporary shift in the human participant's consciousness, either induced by the beings or achieved through the individual's own latent spiritual sensitivity. The bright light in the sterile room could be interpreted as internal visionary experiences, symbolic representations of a non-ordinary state of awareness. Ultimately, Eastern philosophies tend to integrate the spiritual and the alien into a seamless worldview. There is no hard line between a deva, a bodhisattva from a pure land, and an advanced extraterrestrial. All are seen as conscious beings at different points on the endless spectrum of evolution and manifestation. The Grey, therefore, is stripped of its singular, terrifying novelty. It becomes one more face of the infinite, a reminder of the boundless diversity of consciousness. Its message, if any, is likely about the unity of all life, the laws of cause and effect, and the imperative for spiritual growth. Perhaps in Eastern wisdom lies a key to understanding what the Greys truly represent. Not an external threat or a technological marvel, but a mirror reflecting back the vast, unexplored potential of consciousness itself, and an invitation to evolve beyond our limited, fear-based perceptions of the cosmos. As we near the heart of the mystery, we must confront the evidence with clear eyes, setting aside both unwarranted fear and wishful thinking. There exists within the tapestry of the Grey phenomenon a thread of such consistent color and texture that it cannot be ignored, the thread of control. To synthesize the truth, we must first fairly and soberly examine these elements, acknowledging that they form a compelling, and at times deeply troubling, narrative of non-human influence over human lives. The patterns themselves are undeniable and concerning. The methodology of contact, when viewed from a certain angle, reveals a systematic approach. The encounters often begin with a suspension of human agency, the paralysis, the missing time, the inability to move or scream. This is not an invitation. It is an imposition. The environment is always of their choosing and design, typically within a craft or an altered space where the witness has no bearings or means of escape. The procedures that follow, the examinations, the taking of samples, are conducted with a clinical efficiency that brooks no discussion. This is not a dialogue between equals. It is a protocol being executed. Central to this assessment is the profound lack of transparency in their actions. Their motives are never clearly stated. Their origins are obscured. They offer no explanations for their procedures, no informed consent forms, no opportunity for refusal. Communication, when it occurs, is typically one way: a command, a telepathic instruction, or a downloaded image. This opacity is a fundamental tool of control. It keeps the human subject off balance, in a state of reactive confusion, unable to negotiate terms or understand the rules of the engagement. We are left to interpret their intent from their actions alone, a situation that inherently breeds anxiety and suspicion. This leads directly to the most ethically fraught aspect: the non-consensual nature of virtually all close contact experiences. From a human ethical standpoint, this is a profound violation. The body is treated as a site of investigation without permission. The mind is entered, memories are blocked or altered. Even in accounts with benevolent overtones, the initial contact is rarely by mutual agreement. This disregard for human autonomy is the starkest evidence for a control agenda. It suggests that from their perspective, our consent is irrelevant to their objectives, placing us in the category of subjects in an experiment rather than partners in an exchange. Their behavior exhibits clear patterns of secrecy and evasion. They appear under cover of darkness or isolation. They depart abruptly. Their craft avoid direct, prolonged engagement with mass society or official channels. This elusiveness serves to maintain their position of advantage. By controlling the terms, timing, and visibility of the interaction, they control the entire narrative of the relationship. Humanity is placed in the role of a passive recipient of visitations, never an active initiator. This strategic evasion prevents any collective human response, keeping us perpetually in a state of reaction and speculation. The physical interventions, particularly the reported implantation of objects, represent the most tangible form of control. If these accounts are valid, they indicate an ongoing biological monitoring or tagging program. It is the ultimate assertion of ownership or stewardship over a specimen. Similarly, the manipulation of reproductive material and the hybridization narratives, if true, speak to a control over not just the individual, but the very genetic future of the species. These are not the actions of curious observers. They are the actions of gardeners or breeders, shaping a biological line according to a plan unseen by the subjects themselves. Ultimately, every encounter highlights an immense, perhaps unbridgeable, power imbalance. They possess the technology to negate our physics, to manipulate our consciousness, and to move through our world unseen. We possess none of these capabilities. In any interaction, they hold all the cards. This imbalance is the bedrock of the control hypothesis. It frames the relationship as one between a superior and a subordinate, a researcher and a subject, a programmer and a node within a system. The human role is to be acted upon, studied, and potentially altered. To observe these elements is not to succumb to paranoia, but to engage in clear-eyed analysis. The patterns of imposition, secrecy, non-consent, and physical intervention form a coherent argument for an agenda of management, monitoring, and directed change. It is a sobering picture, one that must be fully acknowledged before we can move toward a complete understanding. The control elements cannot be denied. They form a dark, persistent contour in the silhouette of the phenomenon. Yet, as we will see, they tell only part of the story. For within the same body of evidence, sometimes within the very same encounters, there exists a counterpoint, a series of clues that suggest a purpose far more complex than simple domination. Having confronted the imposing evidence for control, we must now turn with equal fairness to its counterpoint. For woven through the same troubling tapestry are threads of a different quality, softer, more enigmatic, but just as persistent. These are the elements that speak not of domination, but of a desire, however strange its expression, for some form of connection. To see only the control is to miss half the picture. The connection hypothesis is built not on wishful thinking, but on a distinct set of observable outcomes and reported interactions that compel us to consider a more complex, and perhaps more hopeful, intention. First are the numerous demonstrations of peaceful, or at least non-hostile, intentions. Despite possessing capabilities that could easily overwhelm us, there is no evidence of conquest, colonization, or mass aggression. They have not seized resources, destroyed cities, or enslaved populations. Their interventions, however intrusive on an individual level, appear surgical, specific, and limited. The most famous consistent message, the urgent warning about nuclear weapons and environmental destruction, is the action of a concerned neighbor, not a conqueror. A conqueror would welcome such self-destruction. An entity seeking to establish a relationship, however, would seek to preserve the subject of its interest. This environmental concern is a major pillar of the connection argument. The vivid, emotional visions of Earth in distress reported by contactees are not threats. They are pleas or teachings. They indicate a value placed on the planetary biosphere and, by extension, on the life it sustains. This suggests a perspective that sees humanity not as a standalone entity, but as an integral part of a living world they deem worthy of preservation. It frames their interest as holistic, concerned with the health of the entire system, of which we are a part. This is the logic of stewardship, not ownership. Perhaps the most profound evidence for a connection agenda lies in the long-term effects of consciousness expansion on experiencers. While the method may be jarring, the outcome for many is a permanent broadening of awareness. The awakening of psychic sensitivities, the dissolution of the fear of death, the direct sense of cosmic interconnectedness. These are gifts of perspective, not tools of subjugation. If the goal were mere control, such awakenings would be counterproductive, creating independent thinkers less susceptible to manipulation. Instead, these effects seem designed to foster a new mode of understanding, to upgrade human perception to a level where a more meaningful relationship might one day be possible. This is borne out in the documented, long-term positive life transformations. The shift from materialistic pursuits to service-oriented lives, the deepening of empathy, the drive toward ecological healing. These are not the behaviors of a broken, controlled populace. They are the markers of a spiritual or philosophical maturation. The encounter acts as a catalyst for this growth, however traumatic the catalyst may be. It forces a re-evaluation of purpose that consistently aligns with greater harmony and responsibility. This pattern of outcome suggests an educational or initiatory undercurrent to the phenomenon. Significantly, despite decades of intense interaction, there is a complete absence of evidence for any intent of mass harm. No war has been started by them. No pandemic has been traced to their craft. No infrastructure has been disabled by their presence. Their most alarming actions are confined to the individual, private sphere. On a global, species-level scale, their footprint is one of observation, cautionary messaging, and subtle influence. This restraint is telling. It implies a prime directive of non-interference with our collective destiny, or at least a profound caution about causing societal collapse, which would be antithetical to any long-term relationship. Finally, when viewed across generations, the phenomenon reveals patterns that suggest gradual relationship building. The slow, cultural acclimatization through media and pop culture, the incremental increase in credible military disclosures, the patient, repeated contact with individuals across lifetimes. This is not the strategy of a sudden takeover. It is the methodology of careful introduction. It is as if they are testing the waters, expanding the circle of awareness, and preparing individuals and, slowly, the culture for a broader realization. The control elements ensure the process remains on their terms, but the goal of that process may be eventual mutual recognition. The connection elements are equally undeniable. They form a compelling narrative of attempted guidance, consciousness evolution, and long-term investment. They suggest an agenda that operates on a timescale and with a subtlety we struggle to comprehend, one that uses startling, even violating, methods to achieve what might be, from a vastly different perspective, a benevolent end, to ensure we survive our dangerous adolescence and awaken to our place in a living cosmos. This evidence doesn't erase the control, it complicates it. It suggests we are not merely subjects in a lab, but students in a classroom where the curriculum is shocking, the teachers are inscrutable, and the final exam is nothing less than our own evolution. Standing at the crossroads of two compelling narratives, one of control, one of connection, we face a choice. Do we embrace a binary, a simple either-or? Or do we allow for a deeper, more nuanced truth to emerge from the tension between them? The synthesis that beckons is not a compromise, but an elevation of perspective. It proposes that what we perceive as opposing forces may, in fact, be two expressions of a single, unified agenda, an agenda operating on a scale and with an intentionality that our human-centric, short-term frameworks struggle to contain. The most profound insight we can entertain is that both control and connection may not only coexist, but be intrinsically linked. Consider the parental analogy. A parent guides a child with a mixture of enforced boundaries, control, and loving instruction, connection. They make medical decisions without the child's informed consent for the child's own good. They enforce rules that feel arbitrary to the child, but are designed for long-term safety and growth. From the child's limited perspective, this feels like pure control. Only with maturity does the deeper connection and purpose behind the actions become clear. Could our relationship with the Greys exist within a similar, albeit vastly more complex and alien, dynamic? Their clinical procedures, their non-consensual interactions, could be the necessary, if jarring, medicine or lesson for a species they perceive as spiritually and psychologically adolescent. This reframes the entire phenomenon. Evolution, whether biological or conscious, is rarely comfortable. It requires disruption, challenge, and the breaking of old forms. The caterpillar does not consent to the dissolution of its body in the chrysalis. The process is controlled by a deeper genetic imperative that leads to a new state of being. The Grey encounter, in this synthesis, is a catalyst for a painful but necessary phase of human evolution. The control elements, the examinations, the genetic sampling, the consciousness interventions, are the tools of this catalysis. The connection elements, the expanded awareness, the environmental warnings, the sense of cosmic belonging, are the intended outcomes. The discomfort is not the point, but it is an unavoidable byproduct of the transformation. From this vantage point, their agenda and our deepest, often unspoken, agenda may ultimately align. At a species level, we face existential threats from our own technology and disconnection from our planet. Individually, many yearn for a deeper meaning, a transcendence of materialism, and a connection to something greater. The Grey phenomenon, in its bewildering totality, appears to address both. It confronts us with the physical reality of a greater cosmic community, solving our loneliness, warns us of self-destruction, addressing our survival, and forcibly expands individual consciousness, answering our spiritual hunger. Their methods are alien, but their project appears to be the shepherding of a volatile species toward maturity and integration. This synthesis requires us to hold multiple perspectives on the same actions. An abduction is, from the human perspective, a traumatic violation. From a hypothetical gray perspective, it might be a necessary medical educational interface with a subject incapable of granting informed consent due to its developmental stage. The removal of genetic material is, to us, a disturbing theft. To them, it might be the careful preservation of a biological lineage or the crafting of a bridge species. The lack of transparency feels like secrecy and manipulation. It might also be a protective measure, shielding a less advanced consciousness from truths it is not yet equipped to handle without fracturing. Ultimately, this leads us beyond our comfortable human binary concepts of good/evil, friend/foe, control/connection. These are tribal, emotional categories born of our evolutionary history. A civilization operating on a cosmic scale and a time span of millennia likely operates on a different ethical and practical calculus. Their morality may be based on outcomes over lifetimes or epochs, not on the comfort of the individual in the moment. What we call control might be their methodology of care for a species they see as both precious and dangerously unstable. Therefore, the true revelation may not be a simple answer, but an invitation to a more mature form of questioning. We have spent decades asking, are they for us or against us? The synthesis suggests this is the wrong question. The right question might be, what are they trying to help us become, and are we willing to endure the difficult process of getting there? The agenda is likely neither sinister nor saintly by our narrow definitions. It is transformative. It operates in the uncomfortable middle ground where profound connection is established through methods that feel, to the recipient, like absolute control. Perhaps the question isn't control or connection, but whether we're ready to understand that. From the perspective of a teacher dealing with a volatile student, they might be the same thing. The final chapter, then, is not about them, but about us, our readiness, our resilience, and our willingness to evolve into the beings this mysterious contact seems determined to awaken. After this long journey through history, evidence, and theory, we arrive at the most personal and practical of destinations, the quiet space within yourself. Whether you carry the vivid memory of an encounter that defies explanation, or you simply feel a deep, resonant curiosity about the grays, the phenomenon ultimately asks something of you. It asks for integration, the gentle, ongoing process of weaving this profound mystery into the fabric of your daily life, finding a way to hold the awe without being swept away, and honoring the questions without demanding premature answers. If you are processing your own encounter, the first and most important step is to grant yourself unconditional permission to believe your own experience. Societal doubt and the internal voice of skepticism can be loud, creating a painful rift between what you know happened and what the world says is possible. Set that conflict aside for now. Your experience is your truth. Whether it felt terrifying, wondrous, or bafflingly neutral, it is valid. Begin by simply acknowledging it, perhaps by writing it down in a private journal, drawing it, or speaking it aloud to yourself. Giving it form outside of your swirling thoughts is an act of self-honoring that begins the integration process. For everyone, experiencer or curious observer, the key is finding a healthy balance between fear and fascination. The gray archetype can easily tip the mind into anxiety. Notice if your curiosity is feeding a sense of dread or hypervigilance. When this happens, gently bring your awareness back to your body and your immediate surroundings. Feel your feet on the ground. Listen to the mundane sounds around you. The mystery exists, but so does this present moment. Conversely, if you find yourself dismissing the phenomenon entirely out of a latent fear, allow a sliver of wonder back in. The balance point is a state of open, calm curiosity, a willingness to entertain the possibility without letting it dominate your emotional landscape. You do not have to walk this path alone. Resources for support exist. For experiencers, Organizations like the Experiencer Research Community or the Free Foundation offer connections to supportive peers and respectful researchers. Books by authors like Dr. John Mack or Whitley Strieber can provide validation and context. For the curious, well-researched documentaries and podcasts can deepen understanding. The goal is not to find definitive answers, but to find a community of inquiry that replaces isolation with shared exploration. Knowing others are pondering the same mysteries can be a profound comfort and a source of strength. Cultivating a personal practice of meditation and openness is perhaps the most powerful tool for integration. Meditation is not about chasing contact, but about calming the mental noise that either fears or craves it. In the stillness, you create a neutral inner space. This space allows you to observe your thoughts and feelings about the phenomenon without being identified with them. It fosters the receptive, non-judgmental awareness that is the opposite of fear. Simple mindfulness, focusing on the breath, or spending quiet time in nature can ground your perspective, reminding you that you are a conscious being having an experience, not a victim of a story. This leads to the essential practice of maintaining groundedness. Integration happens in the everyday. Engage fully with your life, your work, your hobbies, your relationships. Cook a meal with attention. Take a walk and notice the details of the world. The extraordinary nature of the cosmic mystery does not diminish the profound beauty and importance of the ordinary. In fact, a well-grounded life provides the stable foundation from which you can safely contemplate the infinite. It ensures that your exploration of the phenomenon enriches your human experience, rather than detaching you from it. Finally, trust the unfolding of your own journey. There is no deadline for understanding. The phenomenon has been with humanity for millennia. It can wait for you to find your pace. Your relationship to it will likely evolve over time. What frightened you may later intrigue you. What fascinated you may later feel settled. This is not inconsistency, but growth. Trust that your consciousness is capable of navigating this. Whether you've encountered them or simply wonder, there's a place for you in this unfolding story. Your thoughtful curiosity, your cautious openness, and your grounded heart are all valid contributions to the greatest mystery of our age. By integrating it personally, with grace and patience, you do more than make peace with the unknown. You become an active, conscious participant in the human side of the story, ready for whatever comes next. The journey with the Greys, at its deepest level, is not just a series of isolated events, but a subtle catalyst for something much larger happening within the human species. It is a symptom and an accelerator of a collective awakening, a gradual, often imperceptible, shift in how we perceive reality and our place within it. As more individuals integrate these experiences and ideas, humanity as a whole stands at a threshold, poised between an old story of isolation and a new, still unwritten story of cosmic belonging. This awakening begins with a fundamental paradigm shift regarding the nature of reality itself. For centuries, the dominant Western worldview has been materialist and reductionist. The universe is a mechanical accident, consciousness a byproduct of the brain, and we are alone. The persistent, unexplainable presence of the gray phenomenon challenges this at its core. It forces us to consider that reality may be conscious, multidimensional, and teeming with other intelligences. This isn't just about adding aliens to our map. It's about redrawing the entire map to include mind, spirit, and the unknown as fundamental features of existence. This shift, from a dead universe to a living universe, is the foundational step in our collective maturation. This paradigm shift is fueling a global evolution of consciousness. As the idea of non-human intelligence seeps from fringe belief into mainstream possibility, it acts as a psychological and spiritual disruptor. It encourages us to think beyond tribal, national, or even planetary identities. It stretches the imagination and fosters a more holistic, systemic way of thinking. When we contemplate being part of a cosmic community, our petty conflicts can begin to seem like family squabbles in a very large house. This expansion of perspective is the necessary groundwork for a more peaceful, cooperative global society. Central to this is the gradual, collective acceptance that we are not alone. This is not about a dramatic disclosure day, but a cultural osmosis. Through declassified government videos, credible pilot testimonies, and the sheer weight of accumulated encounters, the idea is becoming normalized. The initial shock and fear are giving way to a more nuanced curiosity. This acceptance is a psychological milestone for our species. It humbles our anthropocentrism and ends our cosmic loneliness in one stroke. We are no longer the sole actors on the stage. We are members of a vast, ancient, and likely incomprehensibly diverse cast. This realization naturally fosters a sense of unity through a cosmic perspective. Differences of race, religion, and nationality, while still important, are contextualized within a much larger frame. We are all Earthlings, a single species sharing a fragile, beautiful planet, now faced with the knowledge that we have neighbors. This perspective has the potential to dissolve barriers, encouraging global cooperation on existential issues like climate change and nuclear disarmament. The very warnings delivered by the Greys become a unifying mandate to get our planetary house in order, not just for ourselves, but to be worthy participants in a wider community. Indeed, the environmental awakening we are experiencing is deeply connected to this cosmic shift. The urge to protect our planet is no longer just an ethical or survival imperative. It is a matter of planetary integrity and, perhaps, cosmic responsibility. The vision of Earth as a single, living organism, the Gaia hypothesis, aligns perfectly with the reported interstellar concern for our biosphere. Caring for our home becomes the first practical test of our readiness for broader relationships. It is the foundational homework assignment from the cosmos. All of this points toward the next phase of human development. We are evolving from a planetary, adolescent species, consumed with internal conflicts and short-term thinking, toward a potential cosmic adulthood. This next phase is characterized by a synthesis of our technological prowess with an expanded spiritual and ethical awareness. It values consciousness, harmony, and stewardship as much as innovation and exploration. The Grey phenomenon, in all its baffling complexity, appears to be a mirror and a guide for this transition, reflecting both our fears, the control narrative, and our highest potential, the connection narrative. As more awakened to these possibilities, humanity stands at a threshold unlike any before, not a threshold of invasion, but of invitation. The door to a richer, more mysterious, and more interconnected reality is slowly swinging open, and our collective task is to step forward, not in fear, but in curious, courageous, and unified readiness. As we reach the end of our exploration, we are not arriving at a destination, but pausing at a vantage point. The landscape of the Grey phenomenon stretches out before us, more intricate and profound than when we began, yet its true heart remains veiled. This is not a failure of our inquiry, but its most beautiful outcome. For in the presence of a true mystery, we are offered a rare gift, not a solution to be filed away, but a question that continues to breathe, to invite, and to transform us. The mystery itself is the teacher. Let us reframe this enigma not as a problem to be solved, but as a gift to be received. A problem demands an answer. A gift invites a relationship. The persistent, elusive presence of the Greys in our world and consciousness keeps the door to wonder perpetually ajar. It prevents us from becoming intellectually complacent, from believing we have figured everything out. This state of not knowing, when embraced without anxiety, is a fertile ground for growth, creativity, and humility. It reminds us that the universe is still magical, still capable of the sublime surprise. This sense of wonder is the engine of our evolution. It is what propelled us to map the stars, dive the ocean depths, and split the atom. The gray mystery, hovering at the edge of our understanding, ensures that this engine continues to hum. It keeps us seeking, questioning, and looking upward. It encourages us to refine our science, deepen our philosophy, and expand our spirituality. The search itself, the collective pondering across the globe, is perhaps more important than any single truth we might one day discover. In wondering, we become more than we were. In this light, the grays serve as the ultimate mirrors. They reflect back to us our own fears of powerlessness and violation in their control narrative. They reflect our yearning for guidance, meaning, and cosmic family in their connection narrative. Their inscrutable neutrality holds up a glass to our own tendency toward binary thinking, good or evil, friend or foe. What we see in them tells us less about their true nature and more about the state of our own consciousness, our own readiness. They challenge us to outgrow our primal fears and infantile hopes, to mature into a species capable of holding complexity and paradox. Therefore, let us cherish the questions themselves. Why are they here? Is a more valuable inquiry than any provisional answer we might cling to. It opens a space for dialogue between science and spirit, between skepticism and belief, between cultures and individuals. In that shared space of questioning, we find common ground. The value lies not in being right, but in being curious together. The questions are the threads that connect us to the mystery and to each other, weaving a tapestry of collective seeking that is itself a form of answer. As we move forward, the path calls for a balanced posture, continued vigilance paired with profound openness. Vigilance not from paranoia, but from a respectful awareness that we are interacting with something powerful and unknown. Openness not from naive credulity, but from the wisdom that recognizes the limitations of our current knowledge. We can observe, document, and analyze with clear minds, while simultaneously holding our hearts open to possibilities that may currently defy our logic. This is the stance of the mature seeker. The journey ahead is not a straight line to disclosure, but a spiral of deepening understanding. There will be more sightings, more encounters, more fragments of evidence. There will be periods of intense interest and periods of dismissal. The spiral will turn, and each time it circles back, we will bring to it a little more wisdom, a little more integration, a little less fear. Our collective understanding will evolve, but the core mystery will likely retain its essential, wondrous elusiveness. And so, as the day's explorations wind down and the quiet of night descends, we can release the need to know. We can lay down the burden of solving the cosmic riddle and simply rest within it. You are part of this story, whether as an experiencer, a curious mind, or a peaceful observer. Your consciousness is a node in the network that is perceiving and pondering this great unfolding. Let that thought bring not unease, but a deep, comforting connection to the vastness. Final message asterisk as you drift to sleep tonight. Know that you're part of something vast and mysterious. Whether the Gray's agenda is control, connection, or something beyond our understanding entirely, you are not separate from it. You are witnessing, participating in, and perhaps even shaping the greatest mystery of our time. The stars above are not just distant suns, but perhaps the lights of a shared home or windows into other realms. The quiet of the night is not an emptiness, but a space full of potential. So rest now, with the stars watching over you. Let your breath slow, your mind soften, and let the mystery unfold gently in your dreams, not as a question to be answered, but as a wonder to be lived. Sleep well, dream deep, and know that you are eternally, wonderfully a part of it all.